A year spent in the open air can ruin many things, but what if a person's body was in this condition? Was the person an accidental victim of circumstance, or was he brutally murdered? And how can the criminal be found if the detectives only have an incomplete skeleton at their disposal? Yellow House Canyon is a vast natural area of rugged terrain located near the town of Lubbock, Texas, USA. This area used to be Indian territory, but in 1993, it gained a different kind of fame. During that summer, 2 local residents went hunting in the game-rich canyon. However, at the very beginning of their trip, something suspicious caught their attention. They came across a bone, completely devoid of flesh. From several meters away, it did not appear to be part of an animal. As they got closer, they realized it was a human skull and reported it to law enforcement. That same day, forensic experts arrived in the canyon. In addition to the skull, other items were found nearby, scraps of clothing and a woman's shoe. The remains were scattered. To piece everything together and find the missing parts, investigators sifted the soil around the area. This process allowed them to find several more fragments of the body and smaller bones, as well as some strands of hair. Unfortunately, the skeleton was far from complete. It was likely that predatory animals had dragged the bones around the area. Despite the efforts of law enforcement officers, they were unable to recover all the parts. All of this evidence was taken to the lab for examination. The scant fragments of human remains, according to the forensic expert, had been exposed to the elements for at least a year. To obtain more information, the assistance of a forensic anthropologist was needed. Among the remains, the lower part of the spine, the sacrum, was found. This discovery allowed the experts to determine that the remains belonged to a woman. The shape of the skull helped establish that the deceased was a person of European descent. The cranial sutures had not yet closed, indicating the approximate age of the deceased, which the specialist estimated to be a young woman between 18 and 24 years old. More intriguing were the marks found on some bones. These were notches and depressions of a pointed shape, characteristic of injuries inflicted by a knife. The marks suggested that the girl had died as a result of murder. One cut was located in the shoulder blade area, with 6 cuts in the vertebrae region. In total, forensic scientists counted about 12 to 30 separate injuries. There were likely more, but this could only be confirmed after all the bones were found. Thanks to all this data, a diagram of the victim was created, which depicted the skeleton of the deceased with all her injuries noted. According to the forensic expert, the criminal had attacked from behind. Such injuries could not have been inflicted by the victim herself, leaving no room for doubt. The unknown girl was considered a victim of murder. The notches on the bones indicated that the attack had been very brutal, reflecting a furious assault on this young girl. More information was needed to identify who the victim was and to initiate a full investigation. During the time that the remains had been in the canyon, several disappearances had occurred. It became necessary to turn to the public in the hope of obtaining tips regarding the deceased, after which the search for the perpetrator began. A press conference was held, prompting calls to the city police department. Meanwhile, dental records were checked, and data was compared with records of 64 girls who had disappeared across the United States over the past years, but none matched the description. They then decided to enlist forensic expert and artist Karen Taylor, the only one capable of attempting to recreate the face of the deceased from the skull. Such specialists are usually called upon last, as there is a high probability of error and inaccuracy in the resulting image. Many factors can introduce distortion, but there was no alternative. Karen Taylor was contacted because she had developed a unique method known as two-dimensional facial reconstruction. Unlike other methods, which often strayed into the realm of art and the artist's interpretation, this method relied on scientific data. Karen took into account the structural features of each race, making her approach more accurate than others. Using rubber markers, she measured the thickness of the facial tissues by placing them directly on the skull of the deceased. This method ensured a highly accurate reconstruction based on the thickness indicated by the markers. She established starting points for creating the facial image. This detailed process required many hours of concentrated effort. After positioning the markers, She took numerous photographs from various angles and placed translucent paper over the bones to help outline the approximate facial contours. Next, Karen identified common facial features based on her anatomical knowledge, including that the average human eyeball measures about 25 millimeters in diameter. However, there is limited information available for facial reconstruction since soft tissues like the ears and nose completely decompose. The deceased had only a few tiny skin fragments around her nose, so the minimal information relied on the state of her bones. Karen observed a slight asymmetry at the base of the nasal opening, suggesting a possible injury from the victim's past. Fortunately, during a search in the canyon, a lock of hair was discovered, helping the forensic artist identify the exact color. The deceased had fair hair with a yellow-red tint, providing a useful clue. Given the statistics on eye colors associated with this hair type, Karen chose a likely eye color for the victim. After creating a rough sketch, it was quickly released to the media and shared across Texas. Unfortunately, there was a significant margin of error, so they depended heavily on the artist's skill. Investigators hoped that Karen's depiction would help someone recognize the missing person. A year had passed since the girl went missing, and details about her disappearance might have faded from people's memories. She wasn't listed as missing, possibly because she had no family or friends to report her absence. It would be an understatement to say there was little hope. Now that the police had published a photo of the supposed victim, they could only wait and hope for a positive outcome. A few days went by, and it was an ordinary morning for Beverly Tillery. While browsing through the newspaper before heading to work, she came across a photo of an unknown young woman whose remains had been discovered in Yellowhouse Canyon. Beverly noticed that the woman's features closely resembled those of her 17-year-old daughter, Belinda Tillery, who had gone missing over a year ago. Concerned, Beverly reported the similarity to the police. Dental records were checked, confirming that the remains belonged to Belinda. At the time of her disappearance, Belinda had been working as a dancer at a local nightclub run by people involved in organized crime and a biker gang. Beverly had always disapproved of her daughter working at that club, especially since she was only 17. However, Belinda was a rebellious teenager. She had dropped out of school and often ignored advice from others. The club offered good pay, making it hard for her to turn down the opportunity. Without an education, she felt she wouldn't be able to earn that kind of money anywhere else. Upon discovering the name of the bar where the victim had worked, the detectives quickly went to investigate. They doubted anyone at the bar would be willing to talk. The bartender, upon seeing a photo of the girl, stated that the club would not cooperate. The detectives felt that the staff were withholding information. Everyone insisted they didn't know anyone named Belinda, as if no dancers by that name had worked there. Ultimately, the detectives left without any leads. However, Belinda's family insisted that she had danced there, even the night before she disappeared. When Belinda worked at the club, her older brother typically drove her to work and picked her up whenever he could. On that fateful night, he drove her home after his shift but didn't notice anything unusual. According to him, the last time he spoke with Belinda, she mentioned feeling unwell, so she went to her room to sleep after arriving home. He had consumed a few drinks that evening and swiftly went to bed, passing out and not hearing anything. The next morning, he intended to check on his sister, but he found no one in her room. No one had noticed when she left. The belongings she always took with her were gone. Belinda had departed with her purse, driver's license, and all her essentials. Initially, no one was concerned, assuming she was with friends. However, as time passed and she did not return, the situation became increasingly alarming. Her mother was the most worried. She knew the reason behind her daughter's illness. Belinda had often felt unwell during the previous month, and a few weeks before her disappearance, her family had taken her to the doctor. It turned out that she was pregnant. When they went to the police with a missing persons report, the local authorities reluctantly began the search, but they eventually stopped altogether. It was decided that Belinda had simply run away to start a better life far from her hometown. However, her relatives did not believe this, despite the fact that Belinda had previously disobeyed and led a rather dissolute lifestyle. The news of her pregnancy had changed her significantly. She did not consider having an abortion or running away. Instead, she decided it was time to change her life for the better to become a good mother. The shocking news prompted the young dancer to leave the club, return to school to finish her studies, obtain a certificate, and find a decent job. During this time, Belinda seriously began to discuss further education and a career. She took the matter much more seriously now. She reluctantly talked about who could be the child's father. However, according to her mother, it could only be one person, Troy Armstrong, who always seemed suspicious to her. Her relatives did not approve of her communicating with him. His mother was especially against it, particularly because he was a member of the same gang that owned the club. Additionally, Troy was 10 years older than Belinda, yet he still couldn't seem to settle down. Beverly knew that he was notorious for numerous petty crimes, which resulted in him frequently ending up in prison for short stints. During the intervals between his criminal activities, he lived with friends or in his car. Troy struggled with banned substance addiction and was known for his quick temper. Beverly was convinced that he was capable of much more violent acts than robbery and fighting. From the very beginning, the Tillery family did not like him very much, but Beverly did not want to ruin her relationship with Belinda by criticizing him. She simply accepted her daughter's choice and hoped that Belinda would come to her senses. No one suspected that things could escalate to the point of pregnancy. Beverly believed that this young man could never become a normal father for the child, and he would likely be opposed to the pregnancy. There was no one to suspect of the murder except Troy. As soon as the detectives learned about him, they planned to raid his home. But tracking him down was not easy. Troy was essentially homeless, living wherever he could, though many people knew about him. Thanks to local residents, it was discovered that Troy had not lived in the city for at least several months. As far as his friends knew, the main suspect had headed toward Roswell, New Mexico. The search for him there took 2 whole days, but it was unsuccessful. However, during this time, the police managed to contact his former lover. She turned out to be Angela Allen. She herself had not seen Troy or Belinda for quite some time. Angela reluctantly cooperated with the investigation, describing her relationship with Troy as toxic. She truly loved him, and he claimed to feel the same, but the longer they were together, the more violent and unstable he became. It escalated to the point where he physically abused her on several occasions. Angela was well aware of Belinda's situation, which seemed quite suspicious. She first learned about Belinda when a stranger called her boyfriend, "She is Belinda." Belinda could not get through, but left a message on the answering machine stating she was pregnant and that Troy wanted to talk about it. Shortly before Troy and Angela had disappeared, they had run into Belinda at a local bar where she worked. Troy insisted that Belinda should have an abortion, as he was not prepared to be a father. This led to a serious conflict between them. According to Angela, Belinda refused to terminate her pregnancy, stating that she was determined to raise the child on her own without outside help. She didn't care who the father was or how he would treat the child. This infuriated Troy, but he managed to restrain himself and did not start a fight. After these events, Angela decided to take advantage of the situation and end her relationship with him. Despite their breakup, she still maintained some of her ex-boyfriend's belongings, thinking that he might return for them. She feared that throwing them away might anger Troy. Eventually, she turned everything over to the police. Among these items was a large knife. When this bladed weapon was handed over to the forensic experts who were working with the remains, there was an immediate assumption that it could have been the murder weapon. The appropriate analyses were carried out, but the results were disappointing. The knife could have been the murder weapon, but the tests were highly inaccurate. The longer the bones were exposed to the open air, the more the remaining damage was subject to deformation and erosion due to the elements. A year later, it was impossible to say with 100% certainty whether this object was the murder weapon. The detectives who spoke with Angela had the feeling that she was not telling them everything. The investigators decided to speak with her again, and they were correct. In fact, they had to meet with her 3 times. Each time, Angela provided a little more information, often under pressure and through subterfuge. During the 3rd meeting, she explained why she was being evasive. She simply feared for her life and insisted that cooperating with the police could anger Troy, leading him to seek revenge. Nevertheless, she managed to reveal increasingly valuable information. The main suspect, Troy, was still missing, and the detectives were desperate for leads. Angela mentioned that she had kept in touch with him after their breakup, and that shortly before Belinda disappeared, she had met him again. Troy had said he was going to invite a dancer from the club to camp in the canyon, where the body was later found. On his way back from the canyon, he stopped by Angela's to pick up some things. She immediately noticed that he was acting suspiciously. There was blood on his hands and a fairly large wound. When asked about it, he claimed that he accidentally cut himself while camping. However, Angela no longer believed him. She asked several leading questions, but Troy avoided direct answers. Despite this, it became obvious that something alarming had happened. Shortly after, Belinda really did disappear. Yet, Angela still could not believe that Belinda had become a murder victim. Based on the description, it seemed Troy had killed her with a knife. As often happens, the attacker himself had been injured. When the detectives finally informed Angela that Belinda's body had been found in that very canyon, she had no doubts. Troy had killed the pregnant woman that night after all. Angela was horrified to realize what a dangerous man she had gotten involved with in the past. Even worse was the fact that the killer was still at large, and no one knew where to find him. Sufficient circumstantial evidence had accumulated against him, leading the police to issue an arrest warrant for 27-year-old Troy Armstrong. Angela was interviewed again, hoping she hadn't left out any crucial information that could help find the suspect. But now, she insisted that she had told the police everything she knew. She had no idea where her ex-boyfriend was, but she mentioned his best friend, who worked for a transportation company in California. Angela offered to help by having them talk to this man. The detectives believed her, as it was evident that she wanted the criminal to be apprehended quickly. She said she could not feel safe as long as he was free, especially considering that it was thanks to her that the police had received a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence. After this visit, detectives contacted the transportation company where Troy's friend worked. Fortunately, the management was aware of his whereabouts. The man worked as a truck driver, and each of the company's trucks was equipped with a tracking system, allowing them to pinpoint his location quite accurately. Suspecting that he might be helping Troy evade capture, the transport company management cooperated with the authorities to track the truck driver in real time. During the search, he was moving through Nebraska. To intercept the vehicle, they notified the highway patrol along his route, setting up a checkpoint. Within 3 hours, Troy's friend was stopped. It was believed that he might have dropped off Troy somewhere along the way. However, to the detectives' great surprise, Troy was found in the sleeper compartment of the truck. There was no concrete evidence that the driver had helped him hide from the police, and he denied any wrongdoing. Nonetheless, the main objective was to capture Troy, who was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder before being extradited to Texas. The accused insisted that he had no involvement in Belinda's death. Following his arrest in New Mexico, police searched his personal belongings and found a suspicious key, which turned out to belong to a storage unit he had rented in Mexico. When the police located and opened the equipment, they discovered several personal items belonging to Belinda, some of which were identified by her family. Troy was never able to convincingly explain why he kept these items or how he had obtained them, which only added to the circumstantial evidence against him. Among the items found in the storage room were a driver's license and accessories that Belinda loved and always carried in her bag. They should have been with her after she left work at the nightclub. Troy probably hid all of these to make it more difficult to identify the body if it were found. According to prosecutors, Troy had a grudge against Belinda because she refused to get rid of the baby. After she revealed her pregnancy, his girlfriend Angela decided to break up with him, which drove him into a rage. One night in July 1992, when Belinda saw her family for the last time, Troy borrowed camping gear from a friend. Later that night, after the rest of the Tillery family had fallen asleep, he showed up and invited her to go camping in Yellow House Canyon. He claimed that he had broken up with Angela, wanted to discuss the pregnancy and their future relationship. It is clear that he managed to deceive the naive underage girl who was carrying his child. Not suspecting that it was a trap, she went on this short trip, hoping that they would have a complete family. During the hearing, the The jury was presented with the version of events in which Troy and Belinda were left alone in the mountains. Instead of discussing their life together, Troy again insisted on terminating the pregnancy, which Belinda refused. They quarreled. In a fit of rage, he took a knife and attacked her. She tried to escape but was stabbed more than 10 times in the back, after which she fell to the ground. Belinda was likely still alive when Troy left her to die from blood loss. Upon learning that her ex-boyfriend had finally been arrested and would face punishment, Angela agreed to testify against him in court. Her testimony proved to be pivotal. Angela became bolder and confessed that during their next meeting, Troy admitted to stabbing Belinda in the mountains and leaving her there. Angela had remained silent until then because she feared that if she reported it to the police, she would become his next victim. As she did not know the approximate location of the body, Angela was afraid the authorities wouldn't find it before Troy could take revenge. The trial lasted 4 days, after which the jury took only 2 hours to find Troy Armstrong guilty of first-degree murder. The jury believed that he deserved a much harsher sentence than was legally permissible. In fact, his actions had essentially sentenced 2 individuals, a woman and her unborn child. Unfortunately, at that time, the state did not have a law making the murder of a fetus a crime. The judge decided to sentence the criminal to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In December 1996, he was incarcerated. In 1997, his lawyer filed an appeal, but it was rejected by the court. Troy Armstrong was reportedly serving his sentence at the Gatesville Correctional Facility in Texas. During this time, the law changed, offering him a chance at release. In 2021, he became eligible for parole. However, the commission decided to keep him behind bars, where he remains to this day. On April 27, 2024, the quiet community of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was shaken to its core by the devastating death of 30-year-old Micah Miller, a vibrant and ambitious woman who was found dead in Lumber River State Park, North Carolina. She had been married to a local pastor, John Paul Miller, for nearly 7 years. However, the picture-perfect facade of their relationship hid a much darker truth. What secrets lay hidden within Micah and John's marriage? How could a man of God allegedly commit such a profound betrayal of trust? Micah and John first crossed paths when she was just 14 or 15 years old, as she and her family began attending the Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At that time, John was serving as the leader of the youth group in the same church. Despite the significant age gap, John was 28 years old when he first met Micah. The two developed a friendship. When Micah turned 18, it was John who officiated her marriage to one of his friends. Both Micah and her husband were involved in the church, with Micah having several responsibilities, including working with the media team while her husband was in charge of the sports ministry. After some time, Micah became John's secretary and babysitter for his growing family. John was already married and was the father of 5 children. One day, while Micah was babysitting for John's kids, his wife discovered her husband and the babysitter in a compromising position. It was clear that the two had developed feelings for each other. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Both Micah's and John's marriages ended in divorce in 2016. Just 2 years later, the 23-year-old Micah found herself thrust into a new role as the stepmother to John's 5 children, becoming the pastor's wife. In her position, Micah took on even greater responsibilities within the church, leading worship, overseeing the women's and youth ministries, even traveling abroad on mission trip. Her dedication to her faith and the congregation was evident, but the true nature of her relationship with John remained shrouded in darkness. As Micah's role within the Solid Rock Church grew, so did the allegations of abuse and manipulation that she endured at the hands of her husband. According to Micah's own sworn affidavit, she was subjected to a torrent of mistreatment, including emotional, spiritual, financial, and even physical abuse, throughout her marriage. Micah's family and friends would later come forward with harrowing details of the torment she faced, alleging that John had hacked into Micah's personal accounts, sending messages designed to discredit her. Despite the overwhelming control John exerted over Micah, she refused to be cowed. In January 2023, Micah made the courageous decision to separate from her husband, taking the first steps toward reclaiming her freedom. This decision, however, was not an easy one, as Micah knew all too well the risks she faced in defying John's will. Just months later, in October, Micah filed for divorce, determined to break free from the shackles of her abusive marriage. This bold move was undoubtedly a testament to Micah's strength and resilience, as she faced the daunting prospect of rebuilding her life in the wake of the trauma she had endured. Micah's choice to leave John came at a significant cost. She reached out to the police multiple times after feeling that someone was following her, which added to her anxiety during her attempt to end the marriage. Micah discovered her tires had been slashed and found a tracking device on her car, deepening her fears about John's obsessive need to control her. These events made Micah feel even more vulnerable as she faced the challenges of divorce, constantly anxious about the possible consequences of her decisions. In the months leading up to Micah's tragic death, a series of troubling incidents heightened the sense of danger and mistrust in her relationship with John. As Micah tried to free herself from the marriage and establish her independence, John resorted to increasingly desperate and threatening methods to keep her under his control. In February 2024, Micah's sense of freedom was drastically affected when John had her hospitalized against her will, claiming it was for her health. He alleged that she wasn't taking her medication properly, using this as a reason for her forced admission to a psychiatric facility. However, Micah's family and friends saw through John's deceit, believing he had exaggerated her mental health issues to gain more control over her. As the divorce proceedings progressed, Micah applied for spousal support, with a hearing set for June 5th. This action was a bold statement, indicating that she would not allow John to manipulate her finances indefinitely. However, tensions mounted between them in mid-March when Micah asked John for $2,000 for a trip. John refused her request, suspecting that she would not use the money for its intended purpose. He had ongoing control over their financial decisions. At the same time as this financial dispute, John used his power of attorney to have Micah hospitalized. While she was in the hospital, John took her purse, car keys, and retrieved her car from a parking lot. He claimed he did this because he was worried about what Micah might do upon her release. On the morning of April 27th, surveillance video showed Micah leaving her apartment in Myrtle Beach at 11:38 a.m. She then drove to Dick's pawn shop, where security cameras recorded her entering at 12:12 p.m. and purchasing a Sig Sauer handgun on her own. Micah's phone search history indicated that she had looked up directions to Lumber River State Park, a secluded area in North Carolina. Just before 3 p.m. that day, she made a frantic call to 911. During the call, Micah asked the dispatcher to locate her phone, stating that she was in a national park and was afraid for her life. Her last words to the operator revealed her tragic intentions. She was about to take her own life. This call has sparked intense debate and speculation. Some online conspiracy theorists claim they heard a man's voice in the background, implying that Micah might have been pressured or coerced into making the call. Others argued that the entire call was potentially fabricated, possibly created using AI technology as part of a complex plan involving John. Just over an hour and a half after Micah made her 911 call, Johnny Jacobs, a North Carolina fisherman, discovered a woman's scattered belongings. Jacobs' discovery helped lead law enforcement to Micah's body, which was found in a swampy, wooded area just off the Lumber River. Jacobs reported that afternoon, he heard someone crying in the woods, followed by gunshots. While searching for the source of the sounds, he found Micah's belongings but not her body. He later told media outlets that he saw 3 people in a boat near the scene at the time of the shooting. Jacobs said he asked the 3 boaters, "Did you hear any gunshots?" and they all responded affirmatively. However, the boaters denied hearing any crying. Jacobs eventually traced the source of the sounds to an opening in the river. 20 yards into the opening, he found Micah's fanny pack about 2 feet from the water's edge, along with her cell phone and glasses. According to Jacobs, the fanny pack contained Micah's driver's license, bank cards, keys, wallet, credit cards, and a small Bible. Micah had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. Her Honda Accord was located in the park's parking lot, where authorities found a Sig Sauer gun case, a box of ammunition, and a receipt for a firearm she had bought earlier that day. The North Carolina medical examiner ruled that her death was a result of taking her own life by gunshot. However, Micah's family strongly disagreed with this finding, noting the many bruises, scratches, and defensive wounds on her body. They believed that Micah may have been forced or pressured into taking her life rather than doing so willingly. John insists he had no role in Micah's death, claiming he was not present at the time she died. He states he was at a sporting event in Charleston, South Carolina, which is about 3 hours from where Micah's body was discovered. Several eyewitnesses have confirmed that he was at the event. His vehicle also was seen traveling on Highway 17 in Horry County at 2:22 p.m. on April 27th. The investigation into Micah's death faced challenges due to many inconsistencies and unanswered questions. For example, the presence of multiple shell casings at the scene raised suspicions that Micah could have been the victim of foul play instead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Additionally, Micah's family and friends believe her actions and behavior in the days before her death did not reflect someone contemplating end one's own life. She had a hair appointment scheduled for the following week and was planning to go to church with her family the Sunday. The investigation into Micah's death involved both the Robeson County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, who worked together to gather evidence and understand the circumstances of her death. However, public demand for justice grew stronger, as Micah's family and supporters did not believe the official claim that she committed end one's own life. A key focus of the investigation was the suspicion of John's possible involvement in her death. Allegations of abuse, manipulation, and financial misconduct in their marriage contributed to the belief that there was more to the story. As the investigation progressed, John's behavior and comments raised further doubts about his role in the tragedy. Reports described him as increasingly erratic, with actions and statements that seemed aimed at confusing, manipulating others. Just a day after Micah's body was found in the Lumber River, John made an alarming announcement to the Solid Rock Church congregation. Instead of addressing them with the seriousness the situation warranted, his tone was casual and disconcerting. He began by stating that there wouldn't be an altar call that day and asked everyone to stand for an announcement. John then instructed the congregation to leave the church quietly and not to talk about the announcement while still inside. In a strange turn of events, he urged them to keep attending church and fulfilling their responsibilities, mentioning that he would be taking a break for several days or weeks. He then shocked everyone by revealing that his wife had died, claiming it was self-inflicted and had happened in North Carolina. John's behavior during this announcement was troubling. He seemed to be fueled by adrenaline, requested the congregation to pray for him and his children. He also mentioned that Micah had been struggling mentally and needed medication. His comments were particularly alarming because Micah's body had only been discovered less than 24 hours earlier. The coroner had not yet determined the cause of death. Meanwhile, the Robeson County Police were still investigating the case as a suspicious death, yet John had already labeled it a suicide, attributing it to Micah's mental health issues, despite the significant evidence of abuse and manipulation that had existed in their marriage. John denied any wrongdoing, asserting that the allegations of abuse were untrue and that he never harmed Micah. However, Micah's family and friends saw through his claims and refused to believe him. After Micah's death, John's actions raised further alarm. He insisted on immediate cremation and would not allow her family to see her body unless they complied with his demands. Adding to the growing suspicion, John hired a lawyer and sent letters demanding an end to the accusations against him. These letters contained subtle threats, implying that he wanted to silence anyone who questioned his role in Micah's death. As more details about John's behavior came to light, the public's call for justice intensified. Micah's family, friends, the surrounding community demanded answers and urged authorities to take action against those responsible for her death. As the investigation into Micah's death progressed, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office became involved, bringing their resources and expertise to the case. However, it was unclear which specific areas the federal authorities were investigating. Micah's family expressed significant concerns about the autopsy, particularly because there was no information regarding gunshot residue. They also questioned why the authorities had not conducted these tests. Additionally, the family was worried about the toxicology report, raising the issue of whether Micah was mentally sound at the time of her death or if she was under the influence of substances. There was no documentation to clarify this. The family's concerns grew when Micah's body was cremated shortly after her death, a decision made by John, which prevented the possibility of a second independent autopsy. This action only increased suspicions that John might be hiding something. As the investigation continued, various theories arose regarding John's possible role in Micah's death. Some suggested that he may have used his boat to transport Micah's body to the remote location where it was discovered. Security footage from the pawn shop where Micah bought the gun also faced scrutiny, with some believing that the timestamps were altered to support a specific narrative. Additionally, the fact that John had been reported to the police for transferring church funds into his personal account raised further suspicions about his motives and integrity. One of the most troubling findings from the investigation was the discovery of Micah's detailed diaries, which she had written to document the abuse she experienced from John. John had contacted Micah's family, trying to obtain these documents, which increased suspicions that they contained evidence against him. Micah's family stated that these diaries now belonged to Micah's sister, Sierra Francis, who was appointed as the special administrator of Micah's estate. The diaries are considered crucial evidence in the ongoing investigation, as they are expected to clarify the true nature of John and Micah's relationship and the circumstances leading to her tragic death. Micah's family and friends strongly believe that John's abusive behavior, manipulation contributed to her decision to take her own life. They highlighted the numerous police reports she filed, which detailed her fears for her safety and the harassment she suffered at John's hands. Additionally, allegations of multiple affairs and financial misconduct further reinforced the perception that John was a man driven by his own desires and willing to go to great lengths to maintain control over others. The tragic death of Micah Miller sent shockwaves through the community, led to various reactions and consequences. Following this, Solid Rock Church, where John was a pastor, became a focal point of the controversy. Church leaders reported receiving numerous harassing phone calls and messages from people seeking answers and demanding accountability. The situation was equally troubling for those directly involved in the investigation. The coroner who examined Micah's body received threats. Micah's family, particularly her sister Sierra, firmly rejected the official explanation of her death. They believed that Micah's death was planned and staged by John, and they were resolved to find the truth, no matter the challenges. Their unwavering dedication to seeking justice for Micah demonstrated their love and commitment, alongside their strong belief that the authorities had not thoroughly investigated the circumstances of her death. Meanwhile, Jacobs has become one of the most controversial figures in the Micah Miller case. On March 14, 2025, at the intersection of Iona Church Road and Raynham Road, a rural intersection 2 miles from his home, Jacobs, a key witness in the case, died in a collision between 2 vehicles. Death of key witness fuels belief in conspiracy theories. As more information about the case became available, the public's demand for action against John intensified. Micah's supporters, both in the community and on social media, called for authorities to hold John responsible for his alleged involvement in her death. Micah's family's relentless pursuit of justice and the continuous calls for accountability all highlight the deep, lasting effects of this tragedy on everyone involved. The Shafia family fled war and instability, hoping to build a new life in Canada. They were originally from Afghanistan, a country where traditions dictate fate, family honor outweighs personal freedom. On the surface, they appeared to be an ordinary immigrant family, a father who had achieved financial success, 2 wives, and 7 children. However, behind this image of prosperity lay a harsh reality. Control, fear, and strict discipline became inseparable parts of their lives until one day, the family found itself at the center of one of the most shocking and tragic crimes in the country's history. Mohammed Shafia was born into a poor Afghan family. His father passed away when he was just 2 years old, leaving his mother to care for the household alone. From a young age, he understood that survival required resilience. Education was a luxury beyond his reach, so he started working early. At first, he helped his mother with household chores and then moved on to repairing appliances. Eventually, he realized that there were other ways to make money by buying and reselling goods for a profit. Muhammad's business quickly expanded. He dealt in electronics, furniture, and automobiles, constantly finding new ways to grow his wealth. Lacking formal education, he relied on his instincts and sharp business sense to seize every opportunity. As his financial situation improved, he felt ready to start a family. Rona came from a respected and wealthy background where her family valued traditions and ensured their daughters received an education. Although she was raised in a loving environment, her future was largely predetermined. Like many young women in her social circle, she was expected to marry whoever her parents chose for her. When her parents announced that she would marry Muhammad Shafia, she felt she had no choice but to accept their decision as her duty. The wedding took place at one of Kabul's finest hotels, featuring hundreds of guests. To outsiders, it appeared as a prestigious union between two noble families, yet no one considered Rona's true feelings. After the wedding, her life changed significantly. She was now expected to obey her husband, manage the household, and meet all his expectations. Years went by without any children, which caused Rona's status within the family to become unstable. In Afghan society, a woman's value is often associated with her ability to bear children. Muhammad's frustration grew, and rumors about Rona's inability to conceive began to circulate among relatives. Over time, his irritation turned into cold indifference, creating a widening gap between them. After 7 years of marriage without children, Muhammad decided to take a second wife. The second wedding took place in 1988, and many of the wedding photos show Shafia standing next to his two wives. The three lived together in one household. Tuba Yehia was younger and more obedient than Rona. Her primary value was her ability to bear children. Once she married Muhammad, she quickly gave birth to their first son, followed by another child. As time went on, Tuba's influence in the household increased, while Rona faded into the background. Muhammad enforced strict rules that everyone had to follow without question. Disobedience was met with humiliation or physical punishment. He controlled all financial matters and made decisions for the entire family, demanding total respect. The women in his home were confined to the boundaries he set. Tuba not only accepted these rules but also actively upheld them. She fully embraced her role as the main wife, completely overshadowing Rona. Tuba managed the children, the family finances, and even dictated Rona's circumstances. Over time, her treatment of Rona grew more severe. She isolated Rona, limiting her interaction with the children and restricting her personal freedoms. Hamed Shafia, the oldest son, was raised to enforce control over his sisters. He was taught to believe it was his responsibility to ensure they followed the family's rules and to report any disobedience. Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi, the sisters, lived under constant scrutiny. Any attempt to resist their father or Hamed led to punishment. They were not allowed to make friends, freely leave the house, or choose their own clothing. Muhammad viewed them not as individuals with their own dreams but as extensions of the family, expected to uphold his concept of honor. When the family relocated to Canada, many believed this would offer the children a better life. However, the family dynamics remained unchanged. If anything, the control within the household became even stricter. Muhammad recognized that his children were now in a society where women had rights, so he tightened his authority. The daughters started to notice that life beyond their home was very different from what they had always experienced. They observed their classmates engaging freely, choosing their outfits, and making decisions about their futures. Meanwhile, life at home stayed the same. Hamed took on a stricter role. He watched over his sisters to prevent them from adopting Western habits, monitored their phones, scrutinized their behavior at school, and reported everything back to their parents. Rona had hoped that moving to a new country would improve her situation, but her reality remained the same. She didn't speak the language, had no legal status, and was unemployed. Without a passport or financial independence, she was completely under her family's control. Canada did not provide the Shafia family with freedom. Instead, it became a new place where their old rules still governed their lives. Zainab, the eldest daughter of Muhammad Shafia, was the first in her family to openly rebel against their strict control. She secretly started dating Omar Wahid, a young man of Pakistani descent who was older and would never be approved by her father. Their relationship began with passing notes, progressed to email exchanges, and eventually led to secret meetings. Zainab understood the risks involved. She was constantly watched by Hamd at home and felt unsafe even at school. However, her love for Ammar drove her to take these risks. When her father went on a business trip, she saw a chance to invite Ammar over, thinking they wouldn't be caught. Hamd soon noticed a pair of unfamiliar shoes in the hallway, quickly realizing someone was in the house. He immediately reported it to their parents. Although Ammar managed to escape, Zainab faced severe repercussions. She was physically punished and confined to her room for several months, barred from going outside. During her isolation, Sahar attempted to carve out her independence in a different manner. Instead of openly rebelling, she subtly distanced herself from her family's traditional expectations. At school, she took off her headscarf, wore makeup, and dressed in ways her family prohibited. She also grew close to Ricardo Sanchez, a young man from Honduras who was very different from the type of husband her parents would want for her. Sahar yearned for freedom and carefully planned her escape. She and Ricardo talked about moving to another country where her family couldn't find her. Her plan was to make it look like she had gone to Honduras, while in reality, she intended to cross into the United States. However, her plans took an unexpected turn one evening. While dining at a cafe with Ricardo, she spotted her brother watching her from another table. He didn't approach or say anything, but his presence made it clear she was in serious danger. Upon returning home, she braced for the worst, realizing her father already knew everything. There were no discussions, only punishment. After facing physical aggression, she was prohibited from attending school. Sahar came to understand that escaping would be much harder than she had thought, as it might put her life at risk. In the midst of this chaos, Geethi, the youngest sister, instead of trying to run away or seeking a secret relationship, she acted out at school. Her aggressive behavior, frequent absences, and open defiance of teachers became her form of resistance. She wanted others to recognize that something was seriously wrong at home. She was called to the principal's office, and this led to a meeting with social services. She told school staff and a youth welfare worker that she wanted to be removed from her family home. However, when her parents were invited to discuss the situation, they argued that Geethi's behavior stemmed from negative Western influences. They assured the social workers that they would take care of the issue themselves. The daughter's efforts to defy the strict family rules only worsened their situation. Their father and brother felt they had lost control over them, leading to the need for punishment. The conflict between the sisters and their family had escalated beyond repair. When Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi attempted to escape their family's control, they understood the risks, but they were shocked to find that the system meant to protect them was ineffective against their father's and brother's authority. Zainab was the first to seek help. After months of being confined at home, she understood that her only chance for survival was to leave for good. She escaped and found shelter in a facility for women in crisis. For the first time, she felt safe. However, her absence was quickly noticed. Hamd, her brother, contacted the police, claiming she had been kidnapped and accusing her friend Ammar, hoping to get him arrested. When the police found Zainab, she explained the truth. She had left to escape her family. The police did not force her to return home, but they also failed to provide her with proper protection. After witnessing what happened to her sister, Sahar sought her own way out. Although she was too scared to go directly to the police, she contacted Child Protective Services. She described the harsh restrictions, constant threats, and her fear for her life. The caseworkers listened, but ultimately decided that intervention wasn't necessary since she was nearing 18. They offered her temporary shelter, but that meant she would have to return home once her stay ended. Sahar realized that going back would lead to punishment far worse than what she had already faced. Frightened, she declined their offer. At that moment, she understood that the system could not protect her. Rona was the only one who fully grasped the serious danger the sisters faced, but she felt powerless to intervene. She lived in constant fear herself. She realized that Muhammad and Toba no longer viewed their daughters as obedient family members, but rather as threats to the family's honor. Rona understood that trying to step in would be pointless. Within the Shafia household, it was evident that the daughters had stopped adhering to the rules set for them. They had rejected the traditional lifestyle. Their actions were not only seen as rebellious but also as a significant threat to the family's reputation. Muhammad could not let rumors about his rebellious daughters circulate among their acquaintances. In Afghan culture, such stories spread rapidly, putting the family's respect at risk. What frustrated him the most was that their defiance was happening in Canada, a place where he had less control over his daughters' lives than he did in Afghanistan. The greatest concern for the family, however, was Zainab. She hadn't just disobeyed, she had run away. This was unacceptable to them. She was living independently, making her own decisions, and no longer following her father's authority. To them, this was the ultimate act of betrayal. Tuba realized that she couldn't force Zainab to return, so she found a way to have her come back willingly. She called Zainab, convincing her that their father had changed his mind. Tuba told Zainab that he had given his blessing for her to marry Ammar, allowing them to be together officially. On May 18th, they held a religious wedding ceremony at an Islamic center. The next day, Zainab had her hair done and decorated her hands with henna. Her uncle took her to a restaurant, and on the way, he tried one last time to persuade her to think twice about the marriage, but Zainab remained resolute. However, her sense of freedom was short-lived. None of Ammar's family members attended the ceremony, as they disapproved of the marriage. Tuba was devastated, overwhelmed with embarrassment, and she collapsed from humiliation. People poured water on her to help her regain consciousness. Seeing her mother in distress, Zainab ran into her arms and said, "If you're opposed to this marriage, I'll leave him." Zainab asked for a divorce, and Ammar agreed, saying, "He can't bring shame to his family." The cleric declared them divorced right then and there in the restaurant. They had only been married for 24 hours. After the annulment, Zainab's relationship with Ammar deteriorated sharply. Pressured by her family, she had to cut off all communication with him. Her life became increasingly restricted. Her family monitored her movements and controlled her interactions. Although Ammar attempted to reach out, her relatives made it impossible for them to stay in contact. Eventually, their relationship ended entirely, adding more stress and emotional pain to Zainab's life. She realized she would never experience true freedom and lost all hope for independence. Following this situation, the tension between Zainab and her family intensified, leading to tragic consequences. This marked a turning point from which there was no return. After considering the situation for some time, their father realized that his daughters would not change their behavior or abide by the family's rules. Muhammad felt that he could not wait any longer. He believed that betrayal was unforgivable, and that women who damaged the family's honor needed to be held accountable. He thought he had been too forgiving in the past, and if they did not take action quickly, their family's reputation would be at risk. Therefore, he decided that his daughters would no longer be allowed to live. The only task remaining was to figure out how to execute this plan. Muhammad wanted to keep a low profile because he understood that a crime like this needed careful planning to appear accidental. Thus, the planning commenced. They began preparations weeks ahead of time. Muhammad, Toba, and Hamd outlined the steps to carry out their plan. One important aspect was acquiring a second vehicle, a Nissan Sentra. Officially, it was bought for convenience, but in truth, it was essential for their scheme. It was reported that the Shafia family purchased a used Nissan Sentra for $5,000 Canadian dollars the day before the family left Montreal for Niagara Falls. This would create the illusion of a family trying to reconnect after previous conflicts. The vacation would suggest that everything was fine and that they were making efforts to improve their relationships. Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona felt they had no choice but to participate, even though they had reservations. Disputing their father's decision seemed futile. From the start of the trip, they sensed something was off, but none of them could foresee that this journey would be their last. For several days, everything unfolded as planned. The family visited attractions, took photographs, and chatted with strangers, all carefully arranged to ensure that no one would suspect any underlying tension among them. In the early hours of June 30th, 2009, two cars, a Nissan Sentra and a Lexus RX, left the Kingston East Motel and headed toward the Kingston Mills locks. The Nissan Sentra carried Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona. It is unclear who was driving at that moment, but it was likely Zainab, as she was the oldest and had a driver's license. Following them at a short distance was Muhammad, Toba, Hamd, and the three youngest children, in the Lexus RX. They maintained a safe distance to avoid raising any suspicions. When the Nissan Sentra parked near the locks, Muhammad got out of his car and approached the Nissan. Zainab either got out of the driver's seat voluntarily or was forced to leave. Tuba then took over the driver's seat of the Nissan, remaining inside with the girls to prevent them from feeling suspicious. With their mother beside them, the girls did not sense any immediate danger. Muhammad and Hamd returned to the Lexus and drove to a nearby motel, where they intended to create the impression that the family was merely stopping for the night before resuming their trip. At the motel, they woke the manager to rent 2 rooms, but their answers about the number of guests seemed inconsistent, which raised suspicions. After dropping off the 3 youngest family members at the motel, Muhammad and Hamd got back into the Lexus and returned to the locks. As soon as Tuba spotted their headlights in the darkness, she quickly exited the Nissan and ran towards them. This was the sign that it was time to act. At that moment, the women in car unaware they were in a dangerous situation. The events that followed can only be partially reconstructed from the investigation. It is unclear whether the victims were harmed inside or outside the car. However, forensic evidence provided important details. 3 of the victims, Rona, Geethi, and Zainab, suffered head injuries, likely inflicted to render them unconscious before they were submerged. In contrast, Sahar seemed to have fought back. There were no signs of head trauma on her body, indicating she may have remained conscious longer than the others. One by one, the victims were either drowned in the water or placed inside the car after losing consciousness. Muhammad, Toba, and Hamd started to set up the scene to make it look like a tragic accident. Their plan was to push the vehicle into the water to make it seem like it had rolled in by accident. One of them started the engine, shifted the car into neutral, and got out, hoping the Nissan would roll into the canal by itself. However, things didn't go as planned. The car got stuck on the edge of the concrete ledge. The front wheels had gone over the edge, but instead of falling into the water, the vehicle stayed in place. This was a significant problem. If anyone had shown up at that moment, they would have been caught. One of them reached through the open driver's window and turned off the ignition. They realized that the Nissan wouldn't go into the water without some help. The only way to execute their plan was to use the Lexus to push the Nissan into the canal. They jumped into the Lexus, accelerated, and slammed into the back of the Nissan. The impact was powerful. The left headlight of the Lexus shattered, scattering glass at the scene. With that final push, the Nissan Sentra fell into the water, taking the 4 women with it. Thinking they had completed their crime, they started to cover their tracks. They tried to pick up the broken pieces of the Lexus's headlight but couldn't collect them all. Then, they quickly left the site and returned to the motel to create the impression that they had spent the night there and had no knowledge of the disappearance. On the morning of June 30th, 2009, a worker at the Kingston Canal noticed something odd in the water. He saw the roof of a submerged car. He quickly called the authorities. Emergency responders and divers arrived to investigate. When they removed the vehicle from the water, they found the bodies of 4 women inside. None had tried to escape. There were no broken windows, and no signs of anyone attempting to open the doors. The victims were soon identified as 3 sisters and their stepmother, Rona. Zainab was in the front passenger seat, her head leaning forward, her black cardigan soaked and worn backward after hours underwater. In the back seat was her younger sister Sahar, while Geethi's lifeless body was found above the driver's seat with one arm resting on the headrest and the window next to her fully open. Rona was curled up in the middle of the back seat. None of them were wearing seat belts. The initial inspection of the car raised immediate concerns. The seatbelts were unused, which was odd. During an emergency, people usually grab onto something for safety, yet there were no signs of a struggle. Meanwhile, 3 individuals walked into the Kingston police station: Muhammad Shafia, his wife Tuba, and their son Hamd. They reported that 4 women were missing, claiming that the women had taken the car keys during the night and left without permission. They suggested that the most likely reason for their disappearance was an attempted escape that went wrong. Initially, their story seemed plausible. The family mentioned that Zainab and Sahar had a history of defiance and conflicts with their parents. They reasoned that if the women tried to run away, they might have panicked, lost control of the car, and accidentally driven into the water. However, the first pieces of evidence soon raised doubts about this narrative. First, the car was found in a Kingston canal, which is not a road or highway and impossible to access by accident without knowledge of the area. Second, the condition of the bodies was concerning. If the women had been alive when the car entered the water, they would have tried to escape, yet there were no signs of struggle, no scratches on the windows or attempts to open the doors. This prompted investigators to reevaluate the family's account, and the theory of an accidental crash began to unravel. Detectives began examining statements from the motel staff where the Shafia family had stayed. They discovered that no one saw the women enter the building and surveillance cameras did not record them leaving. This raised suspicions, indicating that someone was definitely lying. While the police proceeded with their investigation thoughtfully and without jumping to conclusions, it became evident early on that this situation was not merely a tragic accident. It appeared to be a carefully orchestrated crime disguised as one. During questioning, Muhammad, Toba, and Haim struggled with details. At first, they claimed the women had left during the night, but when asked for the exact time, none of them could provide a clear answer. Their statements about when they supposedly left kept changing. Haim insisted that he had been asleep and hadn't heard anything, while Toba claimed there had been noise in the house that night. Later, she added that she had woken up and seen the women leaving, only to contradict herself by saying she didn't remember. Muhammad initially stated that he had been in a different motel room at the time, but security footage showed otherwise. Police conducted a thorough examination of the car found in the water. At the scene, they discovered fragments of broken headlights. However, these fragments did not belong to the submerged vehicle. This meant that another car had been present and could have played a role in the incident. Forensic experts took a closer look at the front of the family's Lexus SUV. The damage patterns on the vehicle matched the broken fragments found at the scene. Further analysis revealed that the Lexus had dents and impact marks consistent with a collision with another car. These findings confirmed a new theory. The victims had not simply been left in the vehicle, they had been deliberately pushed into the water. Investigators knew they needed stronger evidence, so they decided to place a listening device in the Shafia family's vehicle, hoping the suspects would incriminate themselves. A few days later, the police got exactly what they were looking for. The recordings captured conversations in which Muhammad openly expressed satisfaction with what had happened. He stated that his daughters had brought shame to the family and that honor had been restored. Tuba supported his words, saying they had done what was necessary. Haim, meanwhile, repeatedly insisted that their actions had been justified. These recordings became key pieces of evidence. They proved that the crime had been premeditated and that the family had deliberately taken the lives of 4 women. The evidence left no room for doubt. The police were now ready to make their move. Muhammad Shafia, his wife Tuba, and their son Haim were arrested on July 23, 2009. That day, they had no idea that law enforcement had already gathered enough proof to charge them. The family was preparing to fly to Dubai, but they were taken into custody just before departure. Muhammad never believed it coming, until the last moment. He believed that the deaths of his daughters and Rona had been successfully staged as an accident, but the investigation had stayed one step ahead. When they were read their charges, first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, they tried to remain composed, but their expressions told a different story. The trial began in January 2012 and lasted 3 months, drawing enormous public attention. Prosecutors presented undeniable evidence that the crime had been meticulously planned. The most damning evidence was the recorded conversations in the family's vehicle. In them, Muhammad proudly stated that his daughters had gotten what they deserved, while Toba and Haim fully supported this sentiment. These recordings shattered any remaining doubts about their guilt. In addition to the recordings, physical evidence was presented. Investigators demonstrated that the family's Lexus had damage consistent with a collision involving the Nissan Sentra. Experts confirmed that the Lexus had been used to push the victim's car into the water. Witnesses were called to testify. Social workers, teachers, and friends of the sisters revealed that they had spoken about the harsh treatment they faced from their father and brother. Many knew they lived in fear, but no one could have imagined it would end in such a horrific way. During the trial, Muhammad showed no remorse. He insisted that the court had misinterpreted the situation and continued to claim that his daughters had brought shame to the family. Tuba, who initially portrayed herself as a grieving mother, later changed her strategy and began denying any involvement. Hamed attempted to present himself as a victim of his father's influence, but the recorded conversations completely dismantled his defense. After 15 hours of discussion, the jury found each defendant guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. Muhammad, Tuba, and Hamed received life sentences in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. They appealed the decision, hoping for a reversal, but the court confirmed their conviction. Their actions were deemed an act of honor-based violence, a deliberate and calculated crime committed in the name of control and tradition. The family, once focused on preserving its honor, lost everything. Their names became associated with cruelty. The Shafia case is now one of the most shocking examples of such crimes in Canadian history. After the arrests of Muhammad, Tuba, and Hamed, the remaining Shafia children faced a challenging situation. As they were still minors, they needed guardianship. Canadian authorities intervened, placing them under state protection and assigning social services to ensure their well-being. To safeguard them from public scrutiny and potential retaliation from extended family, their identities and locations were kept confidential. Some relatives in Afghanistan tried to intervene, demanding the children be returned to their biological family, but Canadian law protected them from such demands. The younger Shafia children were given a chance to grow up away from the harmful environment of their past. They changed their names and started new lives. However, they would always carry the tragedy of their family's crimes as a lasting reminder. Their current whereabouts are unknown, but one certainty remains: they were given the opportunity for a better life, unlike their late sisters and Rona. In a seemingly quiet house, fear permeated the air. A family was trapped in a room, holding their breath and hoping that the locked door would protect them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The lock broke, someone collapsed, and footsteps echoed in the hallway. This was not just a random burglary, it was a premeditated act. When the police arrived in the morning, they discovered a perplexing crime scene. A family of 4 and their 3 dogs were found shot dead in their home. It appeared to be a robbery, yet nothing had been taken. All clues pointed toward one individual, but the real question remained: who was truly in control? As detectives looked for answers, they realized the situation involved far more than just love, jealousy, or revenge. Someone had orchestrated everything. When the truth finally emerged, it was more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 in an environment where crime and violence were common. As a child, he displayed a reckless, rebellious attitude. He had little interest in school, often fighting with classmates and neglecting his studies. His first run-in with the law occurred during his teenage years when he was caught participating in a robbery. Due to his age, he faced minimal consequences. Nathaniel soon discovered that a life of crime offered not only excitement but also financial rewards. His criminal activities escalated, and by 2016, he was imprisoned for assault. A year later, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. Nathaniel had a particular fascination with firearms. He built a collection of guns. Although the courts prohibited him from owning firearms, he disregarded this ban, turned to the black market to acquire weapons illegally. Despite his criminal history, Nathaniel attempted to pose as a legitimate businessman by starting a private security company, even though it was not properly licensed. Legally, he was not allowed to carry a weapon, yet he boasted about his supposed authority on social media, posting pictures of himself in tactical gear and heavily armed. On the other side of the story is Ermelinda Palomo, born on 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was a fiercely independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. Although she had a stable upbringing, her personal life was marked by challenges. She had married young, but the marriage ended, leaving her to raise her children on her own. Determined to support them, she held multiple jobs while managing her responsibilities as both a mother and grandmother. She was strict with her family, which earned her respect but sometimes led to resentment. When she met Nathaniel, those around her found it hard to understand their connection. He was 20 years younger, had a tumultuous past, and represented the chaos she had always tried to avoid. Some say they met through mutual friends, but regardless of the circumstances, their relationship moved quickly. Initially, Ermelinda brushed Nathaniel off, but his confidence, persistence, and reckless charm drew her in. For Nathaniel, Ermelinda represented stability and a sense of security he had never experienced. For her, it was a new adventure, an opportunity to feel in control over someone with a free lifestyle. Their relationship was unconventional, with an attraction rooted in their differences. Soon, they moved in together, sharing a crowded home with Ermelinda's children and grandchildren, but their living situation was anything but harmonious. Nathaniel's obsession with weapons remained strong over the years. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to buy and show off firearms, making secret deals and finding loopholes to justify his actions. For him, guns were not just a collection, they were a part of who he was. He always carried a weapon, even inside the house, frequently took apart and cleaned his firearms on the kitchen table. At first, Ermelinda paid little attention to this behavior. She was more focused on the money he made than the legality of his actions. However, as time passed, she began to realize that Nathaniel's interests went beyond financial gain. He was unpredictable and could become angry over minor issues, such as a misplaced word or an unfriendly glance. His temper could shift from intense rage to unnerving calm in an instant. Cristiana Espinosa, one of Ermelinda's daughters, was the first to express concern. Unlike others who ignored the warning signs, she recognized Nathaniel for who he really was, a dangerous man. She noticed how he talked about violence, carried himself with arrogance, and never tolerated being contradicted. But what scared her the most was how quickly he could lose control. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had been living together for 6 years. On the surface, their relationship appeared stable, but its foundation had deteriorated long ago. Nathaniel had always been unfaithful, and his affairs had become routine. He used social media to meet new women, engaged in secretive conversations, and carefully deleted his messages. Often, he would leave late at night, providing vague excuses about work or meetings. Ermelinda would wake up in the middle of the night to find him gone. He would return by dawn without any explanation. Nathaniel never feared being caught. He thought Ermelinda either wouldn't discover his infidelities or wouldn't confront him if she did. He mistakenly believed he had all the control, not recognizing Ermelinda's true strength. At first, Ermelinda chose to overlook the warning signs, but soon the evidence became too clear to ignore. His late nights, secretive messages, and newfound obsession with his appearance all indicated something troubling. Her fears were confirmed when she saw a suspicious message pop up on his phone, leaving no room for doubt. Rather than confronting him right away, Ermelinda decided to gather evidence. If Nathaniel thought he was safe from consequences, he was about to find out otherwise. She began monitoring him closely, observing his movements, noting his habits, and even checking his messages when he wasn't paying attention. Before long, she could tell when he was lying, when he was trying to cover his tracks, and when he was sneaking off for yet another secret meeting. With each new revelation, her anger grew stronger. She realized she had two options: to leave him behind and erase him from her life, or to make him regret every decision that led to this moment. The more she considered it, the clearer her resolve became. She refused to be just another woman he discarded. If she wanted to make him feel pain, she had to be strategic. Instead of erupting into an argument, she decided on a different approach. She would make him feel cornered. She planned to turn his own life against him. Ermelinda's plan began with deception. She created fake social media accounts, selecting photos and inventing identities to construct believable personas. She studied online scams to learn how to manipulate and deceive effectively. This included understanding threats, the structure of underground networks, psychological tactics. Her most powerful tool was information. She figured out how to track locations, access hidden data, and manipulate the digital landscape in ways Nathaniel would not anticipate. Then, she initiated her scheme. Her first contact with Nathaniel came through a woman who seemed genuinely interested in him. As expected, he fell for it and responded eagerly, unaware that he was entering Ermelinda's trap. Initially, their conversations appeared harmless, consisting of light flirtation. However, she began to drop hints about his life that she shouldn't have known, leading him to believe someone was monitoring him. The tipping point came when she sent him a message with his real-time location. This left Nathaniel unsettled. Ermelinda could see the change in his demeanor as he started looking over his shoulder and checking his surroundings. But her tactics were far from over. The next phase of deception brought in new individuals. Nathaniel began receiving messages from various people. Some were threatening, while others falsely claimed to offer him protection. They contacted him through different platforms and phone numbers, without any clear pattern. Some messages demanded money, while others warned him to avoid certain locations. A few suggested that he was already involved in something much larger than himself. This confusion was intentional. His behavior changed almost overnight. He became restless and anxious, avoided answering unknown calls, constantly checked his surroundings, and even asked Ermelinda to drive him around to ensure he wasn't being followed. He changed his passwords and deleted messages, trying to rid himself of the unseen threat. However, the more he attempted to escape, the more entangled he became in Ermelinda's scheme. She observed with satisfaction as paranoia consumed him. Unbeknownst to him, the real danger was lurking right under his roof. In May 2023, a new woman entered Nathaniel's life, Zoraida Bartolome, one of his co-workers. Zoraida was already entangled in her own complicated situation. She was married with 2 children but was unhappy at home. She had cheated in the past and didn't feel guilty about it, believing that her own happiness was more important than being loyal. For Nathaniel, Zoraida represented an exciting escape from his troubled relationship with Ermelinda. Their connection began with stolen glances and quiet conversations, quickly escalating into something they both found hard to abandon. Ermelinda had been observing Nathaniel closely and noticed a shift in his behavior. At first, she assumed Zoraida was just another fleeting romance, but then she discovered messages that revealed deeper feelings. Nathaniel was telling Zoraida that he loved her and wanted a future together. She reciprocated those feelings, and they fantasized about leaving everything behind to start anew. As Ermelinda read their exchanges, she felt a mix of pain and humiliation. Despite her efforts to protect their relationship, Nathaniel was pursuing another woman. Now, she felt compelled to take drastic action against him. She escalated the psychological manipulation, introducing even more frightening figures into Nathaniel's life. He was no longer just being observed, he felt as if he was being hunted. Nathaniel had endured too much to feel fear anymore. He had survived the worst, or so he thought. Now, all that mattered to him was Zoraida. Leaving her was not an option. For the first time, he wasn't merely hiding an affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda noticed this change in him. If she couldn't break Nathaniel directly, she would aim to destroy Zoraida instead. Her first tactic was to undermine Zoraida's stability. Using her network of fake accounts, she contacted Zoraida's husband, Alberto Rolón. Initially, she planted vague doubts through anonymous messages that suggested betrayal. She even included photos of Zoraida and Nathaniel together, ensuring they were clear enough to raise suspicion. However, Alberto was not easily swayed. He dismissed the warnings, unwilling to accept that his wife could deceive him so openly. That's when Ermelinda intensified her approach. The subsequent messages were not just about infidelity, they included threats. Unsigned letters arrived at their home with clear implications. If Alberto did not take action, his family would be in danger. Alberto began to observe Zoraida more intently. The tension in their home was exactly as Ermelinda had intended. However, Nathaniel was still unwilling to let go. Even as paranoia invaded his life, he held on to Zoraida as if she were his last hope. Ermelinda manipulated his perceptions, convincing him that Zoraida was providing information to the people spying on him. She crafted a story so believable that even Nathaniel began to doubt his own reality. Using fake accounts, she sent messages from imaginary informants, all suggesting the same idea. Zoraida wasn't just a woman Nathaniel had fallen for, she was working against him and was the source of the ongoing threats. Nathaniel's paranoia took over him completely. He confronted Ermelinda about his suspicions, and she played along convincingly. Initially, she seemed unsure, but then she reluctantly confessed that she had also received warnings about Zoraida. Nathaniel realized he could no longer dismiss these concerns. He had to take action to ensure his survival. Next, Ermelinda put him to the ultimate test of loyalty. She made him believe that his supposed enemies were closely monitoring him and required evidence that he hadn't betrayed them. The only way he could prove his loyalty was by making a crucial decision himself: kill Zoraida. By the time Nathaniel reached his decision, he felt no hesitation. There was no fear or regret, just a cold, determined focus on what needed to be done. He started planning immediately, treating the situation like a mission. Nathaniel studied Zoraida's routines, tracked her schedule, and identified when she was most vulnerable. He noted when Alberto was home, when the children were asleep, and when it would be easiest to enter the house. He mapped out potential escape routes, looking for surveillance cameras and memorizing the neighborhood layout. Simultaneously, he prepared his supplies. He already had a stockpile of weapons but gathered additional tools, including clothing to help him blend into the night, gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, tape, and a flashlight. Together with Ermelinda, he chose items carefully, ensuring no one would suspect anything. Although Ermelinda remained in the background and was not directly involved, she always provided guidance to keep him on track. By the time everything was ready, Nathaniel had stopped considering the consequences. The night came. Ermelinda drove towards Zoraida's house with an unsettling calmness, acting as if it were just another evening. She even asked Nathaniel why he needed to go there, though she already knew the reason. He didn't answer. He no longer cared about her opinion, only the task ahead mattered. When they arrived at the house, Ermelinda remained in the car while Nathaniel got out. As he expected, the front door was locked. He quietly moved around to the side of the house, found a window, and broke the glass. The sound startled Alberto awake. He sat up, listened intently, and then cautiously approached the noise. By that time, Nathaniel was already inside. As soon as Alberto rounded the corner, Nathaniel fired his gun, but his shot went wide. Realizing this was more than just a break-in, Alberto turned and ran toward the hallway, desperate to reach his family's room before the intruder. However, Nathaniel was quicker. Gunshots rang out through the house. Alberto fell to the ground before he could reach the door. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the next gunshot broke the stillness, sending Zoraida into a panic. Without thinking, she rushed to the bedroom, pulling her children along, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. She knew Nathaniel was inside and was unsure how many others he was with, but her priority was to keep her family safe. Moments later, Nathaniel slammed his shoulder against the door, trying to force it open, but it held strong. Frustrated, he stepped back, aimed his gun, and shot at the lock. The bullet pierced through the wood. Zoraida gasped as the impact hit her. She stiffened and then collapsed. The door swung open. The children huddled together, their eyes filled with fear. The neighbors only heard a few brief, muffled gunshots. It all happened within minutes. Nathaniel looked around at the scene, took a deep breath to calm himself, and then began to methodically rearrange things. He flipped over furniture, opened drawers, and scattered valuable items on the floor to make it appear as though a robbery had taken place. Once he finished, he stepped over the bodies and exited into the night. Ermelinda was waiting for him in the car. She didn't need to ask how it went. Her expression said it all. They drove away silently, leaving the chaos behind. The sounds had awakened the neighborhood, and after a few minutes, someone finally summoned the courage to call 911. Soon after, sirens filled the street. Officers arrived to find shattered glass, a broken door, and clear signs of a break-in. Inside, the bodies revealed a much darker story than just a failed robbery. Nathaniel had made serious mistakes, careless ones. Nothing of value had been stolen. the disarray of his possessions seemed like a feeble attempt to mislead. It was evident that this incident wasn't simply about theft, it was premeditated and targeted. By morning, detectives were connecting the crime to Nathaniel Huey, the only person with a motive. At Zoraita's workplace, everyone knew about their affair. It hadn't been a secret. As detectives continued to investigate, things looked increasingly bad for Nathaniel. His history was filled with crimes, assaults, suspicious dealings, and a collection of weapons. As the police gathered evidence, Ermelinda maintained her facade. She kept messaging Nathaniel, using the false identity she had created. She assured him that everything was under control, claiming the mafia was protecting him and that as long as he followed their instructions, he'd be safe. He trusted her, but the investigation was progressing more quickly than Ermelinda anticipated. They scrutinized Nathaniel's recent activities, analyzing every call, email, and text message. One thing stood out. In recent months, he had received a flood of anonymous threats, warnings of danger, and claims that he was being hunted. However, all those messages had originated from newly created accounts. If this were truly a mafia operation, why was the evidence focusing solely on Nathaniel? The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer it became that the threats were staged, as if someone had been fabricating a false narrative specifically for him. This was the turning point in the investigation. Nathaniel was in a downward spiral. He sensed that the police were closing in on him and started noticing unmarked cars tailing him, along with strangers watching him too closely. He convinced himself that the mafia was still after him, waiting for him to make a mistake. In his desperation, he reached out to the only person he believed he could trust, his mother. He begged her for help, claiming he was being falsely accused of something terrible and needed to go into hiding. However, she refused to help him. With nowhere else to turn, Nathaniel managed to stay hidden for a few days, but eventually, security cameras captured him in a grocery store. A manhunt ensued, with patrol cars flooding the area, but by the time the officers arrived, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had already made it onto the highway. The chase began. Police followed with sirens blaring for miles, but Nathaniel had no plans to stop. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, accelerating and weaving through traffic in a frantic attempt to flee. Ermelinda had carefully planned every detail leading up to this moment, and now she was watching her plan unfold perfectly. Ahead of them, traffic became congested. Nathaniel attempted to navigate around a truck, but he lost his grip, causing the tire to screech against the road. The car spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail and flipping multiple times before coming to a sudden stop. Officers surrounded the wreck, weapons drawn. Nathaniel slumped in the driver's seat, a gun in his hand, while Ermelinda sat motionless beside him. In those final moments, he had turned the gun on her and then himself. Investigators sifted through the wreckage, trying to understand what had transpired inside the car. Did he realize what was happening? The investigation didn't stop there. Detectives focused on Ermelinda's devices. Hidden within her files were hundreds of messages, chat logs, and notes detailing her manipulation of Nathaniel, dozens of fake accounts that she had carefully created and controlled. She had constructed this elaborate scheme. She understood how to break a person's will and instill fear so deeply that they would do anything to escape it. And it had worked. Nathaniel had never been in danger. There was no mafia. The true enemy had been sitting right beside him all along. In the end, the case was closed, but one question lingered. Did Nathaniel understand the situation before he took action? Ermelinda's calculated plan, fueled by wounded pride and a desire for revenge, transformed Nathaniel from an unfaithful partner into a paranoid pawn who unwittingly executed her deadly scheme. The Romeoville murders, disguised as a robbery, revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and hidden motives. As the investigation uncovered Ermelinda's intricate web of lies, it left one lingering question unanswered. Did Nathaniel ever glimpse the truth behind his actions, or did he remain trapped in her illusions until the end? On a seemingly ordinary evening in Bolingbrook, Illinois, an unimaginable event occurred. A woman was discovered dead in her bathtub. Her hair was wet, and there was a severe gash at the back of her head. Initially, it appeared to be a tragic accident, perhaps a slip and fall, but as investigators delved deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. The most shocking revelation: the individual who may hold the key to this mystery was someone dedicated to protecting the community. What really transpired that night, and how did this case evolve into a startling tale of deception, manipulation, and betrayal? Kathleen Savio was born on June 13, 1963, in Glendale Heights, Illinois. She was the youngest of 4 siblings, was raised by her parents, Henry Jerry Savio and Mary Savio. When Kathleen was just 2 years old, her parents divorced. Later, her mother remarried, and the family moved to a different city in Illinois. Despite financial difficulties during her childhood, Kathleen was determined to create a better future for herself. She focused on her education, eventually became an accountant. Friends and acquaintances described Kathleen as warm, friendly, and charismatic, with a unique talent for connecting with others. At 20 years old, she went on a life-changing blind date with Drew Peterson. He seemed charming and was initially a great match for her. Drew worked as a police officer in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad in Illinois, a job that brought him respect and authority. Drew was born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook, a suburb of Chicago, and was raised by his strict parents. Drew was an older brother to 2 siblings. In high school, he stood out as an athlete and was known for his competitive nature. During his teenage years, he started his first serious relationship with Carol Brown. After graduating, Drew enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1974 and married Carol that same year. He was discharged in 1976 and the following year joined the police force in his hometown. Within a year, he moved to an undercover role in the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, where he gained recognition. By the age of 25, he was named Police Officer of the Year. However, his personal life was troubled. Despite having 2 children, his marriage to Carol ended in 1980 when she found out he was unfaithful. Carol received custody of their kids. Known for his arrogance, Drew often boasted to friends about how easily he attracted women. In 1981, he met Victoria Vicky Connolly, and they married in 1982. Their marriage lasted almost 10 years until Victoria decided to divorce him in 1992, citing ongoing domestic abuse as the main reason. This claim was later supported by her daughter, Lisa Ward, who lived with them from ages 8 to 18. She reported physical and psychological abuse from Drew. Until later, a troubling rumor from their marriage involved an incident after they purchased a bar together. One night, after leaving the bar, Victoria was in a car accident that required surgery. Some sources suggested that Drew might have tampered with her brakes, but no solid evidence came to light. During his marriage to Victoria, Drew began an affair with Kathleen Savio, who was unaware of his marriage. To Kathleen, Drew appeared to be the perfect partner. He showered her with gifts and affection, took her on trips, promised her a stable future. Moved by his attention, she quickly fell in love with him. When Drew eventually told her he was going through a divorce, he portrayed his wife as a banned substance addict and claimed he could no longer handle the situation. Their romance accelerated rapidly, leading to their engagement just 6 months after their first date. On May 3, 1992, shortly after Drew finalized his divorce, they got married. Over the next 2 years, Kathleen gave birth to their 2 children, but their relationship began to change. While she focused on raising their family, Drew sought excitement outside the home. What began as a loving relationship turned unhealthy. Drew's charming exterior vanished, revealing a controlling and abusive nature. At first, his mistreatment was verbal. He insulted Kathleen's appearance, calling her unattractive and making hurtful comments about her weight. As time passed, his behavior became increasingly harmful, trapping Kathleen in a marriage that was far from the fairy tale she had imagined. Drew's aggression intensified. One day, Kathleen, feeling frustrated and tired from his continual absence and lack of support with their children, confronted him. What began as a heated argument quickly escalated into violence. Drew grabbed her arm and pushed her into a table, causing her to sustain a head injury and multiple bruises. The injuries were serious enough for her to go to the emergency room. Although the hospital recorded the incident, Drew publicly denied any wrongdoing. In a televised interview, he claimed that, As a police officer, he needed to act differently than an ordinary citizen to protect his job. Kathleen decided to stay in her marriage despite the challenges. Meanwhile, Drew turned his attention to a new relationship with a much younger woman named Stacy and Callis, who was nearly 30 years his junior. He was even bringing Stacy to the home that he shared with Kathleen and their children. On at least one occasion, he spent the night with her in the basement while his family slept upstairs. Stacy, born on January 20th, 1984, in Downers Grove, Illinois, graduated high school early and began working as a receptionist at a local hotel, where she and Drew first met. For a time, Kathleen was unaware of the affair, but that changed in October 2001 when she received an anonymous letter that revealed Drew's involvement with 19-year-old Stacy. Although Kathleen's marriage had been struggling, this news devastated her. She confronted Drew, who denied the affair. Distraught, Kathleen called her sister, crying as she shared that not only had Drew cheated on her, but he had also physically assaulted her during an argument by throwing her against the refrigerator. By mid-2002, Drew had moved out of their home and into a new house just a few blocks away, which many viewed as a deliberate act to provoke Kathleen. The divorce was quite tense as Kathleen fought over custody, child support, and her share of Drew's pension. However, Drew was unwilling to compromise. Kathleen was a strong and devoted mother who refused to back down easily. Their disputes escalated, leading to the police being called to her home at least 18 times, each report documenting domestic arguments. One particularly alarming incident occurred on July 5, 2002. According to the police report, Drew broke glass in the house and then forced Kathleen to sit on the staircase for hours while he stood over her, brandishing a knife and threatening her life. Kathleen felt increasingly unsafe, especially since Drew was a police officer in the same department that handled her complaints. As a result, her reports were often dismissed as typical domestic issues, and no serious action was taken against him. Fearing for her safety, Kathleen sought legal protection. On November 14, 2002, she wrote a letter to the state's assistant prosecutor describing Drew's worsening violence, urgently requested an emergency protection order before it was too late. She warned that Drew knew how to exploit the system and that she feared for her children's safety as well as her own. Despite the urgency of her message, her requests were ignored. Kathleen felt helpless, alone with her children, and trapped in a perilous situation. Drew officially married Stacy on October 18, 2003, shortly after finalizing his divorce. At 49 years old, he married a 19-year-old. Soon after, Stacy gave birth to their first child. Initially, she seemed happy in her role as a stepmother, even though Drew's eldest child was not much younger than she was. Their life looked ideal. They traveled often, hosted extravagant parties, and portrayed themselves as a loving couple despite their significant age difference. However, the initial bliss did not last. Drew's controlling behavior re-emerged, and he became obsessive toward Stacy, monitoring her phone, tracking her movements, and making unfounded accusations. Then, on the night of Monday, March 1, 2004, a worried neighbor knocked on Kathleen's door several times without getting a response. Concerned, the neighbor decided to check inside and made a shocking discovery. Savio's nude body was found in the bathtub in the master bedroom of the Pheasant Chase Drive mansion. Naturally, Drew became the primary suspect, but he had a solid alibi. He was home with Stacy. He also stated that, as agreed, he had spent the previous weekend with his children and returned them to Kathleen on Sunday. Forensic investigators found no signs of forced entry or struggle in the home. Although Kathleen's autopsy showed bruises as well as a large, unexplained gash on her scalp, there were no defensive injuries. Authorities quickly classified her death as an accidental drowning without conducting a more thorough investigation. A significant detail was overlooked: the bathtub was completely dry when her body was discovered, raising further suspicions. The lead detective in the case was a close friend of Drew's, and his so-called interrogation of Drew resembled more of a casual chat between friends than an official inquiry. Stacy, supporting her husband, confirmed his alibi by claiming they had spent the entire weekend at home with their children. Kathleen's family was heartbroken by her unexpected death. Just days later, They held a touching memorial, honoring her as a devoted mother and a kind person. Shortly after this, Drew was awarded full custody of the 2 children he had with Kathleen. Stacy officially adopted them, creating the impression of a happy blended family. However, the facade of a perfect marriage soon crumbled. As time went on, Drew's controlling behavior became increasingly evident. By 2007, Stacy was fed up with his oppressive ways and seriously contemplated divorce. Then, on October 28th of that year, she disappeared without any explanation. Her sudden vanishing shocked her family, as Stacy had never shown any signs that she would willingly leave without informing anyone. Stacy's family began a desperate search for her and refused to give up until she was found. In contrast, Drew displayed little concern throughout the search process. During interviews, he made dismissive and sarcastic comments, implying that Stacy was merely enjoying attention and likely out dancing or with another man. Stacy's family suspected Drew might be involved, especially since she had recently told him she wanted a divorce, something he was unwilling to accept. As their suspicions grew, Drew tried to change the narrative by claiming that Stacy had changed a lot since her sister's death in 2006. He stated that she had been struggling emotionally and receiving treatment for depression. However, rather than clearing his name, these claims only heightened the investigators' concerns. Authorities began to question whether Kathleen's death was really accidental or if something more sinister was at play. Just weeks after Stacy went missing, both the Illinois State Police and the FBI reopened the investigation into Kathleen's death. In November 2007, Kathleen's body was exhumed for a second autopsy, which revealed findings that contradicted the original report. Forensic experts discovered clear signs of a struggle, indicating that she had fought for her life. As a result, Drew becomes the prime suspect in both the death of his 3rd wife and the disappearance of his 4th wife. Instead of staying out of the spotlight, he actively sought media attention, appearing on talk shows and making arrogant, sarcastic comments as if he relished the notoriety. In January 2008, the case took a surprising turn when Drew's brother, Thomas Morphy, came forward with important information. He claimed that he helped Drew remove a large blue container from their house around the time Stacy disappeared. Several neighbors backed up his account, stating they had seen Drew with the container. Additionally, Thomas disclosed that he had assisted Drew in making a phone call from Stacy's phone, which made it look like she was at the airport shortly after her vehicle was found abandoned there. As the search for Stacy continued, the investigation into Kathleen's death advanced. On February 21, 2008, her death was officially reclassified from an accident to a homicide. About a year later, Drew was arrested as the main suspect. His legal team argued that they had a strong defense due to the absence of physical evidence, such as fingerprints, DNA, or eyewitness accounts linking him directly to the crime. As the trial progressed, accusations arose against the police department, with many claiming that Drew, having been a sergeant there, received preferential treatment and that the initial investigation was mishandled. This raised serious concerns about the integrity of law enforcement, suggesting issues of corruption and cover-ups. Exposing institutional bias alone did not establish Drew's guilt in Kathleen's murder. The prosecution needed a significant breakthrough. That turning point came when the lead prosecutor executed a strategic legal move that transformed the case. On May 31, 2012, Drew Peterson's trial began. The first witness was Kathleen's sister, Susan M. Savio. Her testimony deeply affected everyone in the courtroom as she recounted that Kathleen had confided in her about Drew threatening to kill her and make it look like an accident to avoid suspicion. Next, Neil Scory, a pastor and marriage counselor who had worked with Stacy, took the stand. He testified that Stacy had privately expressed her concerns that Drew was responsible for Kathleen's death. He recalled that Stacy once woke up in the middle of the night to find Drew missing around the time Kathleen was believed to have died. When Drew returned, he allegedly asked Stacy to lie to the police and provide him with an alibi. Further unsettling details emerged in court, including the fact that Drew had been present during Stacy's police interview, suggesting that he had pressured her to protect him. Additionally, the attorney who represented Stacy during her divorce revealed that Stacy had reached out to him just days before her disappearance, seeking legal advice about leaving Drew and made it clear she believed he had killed Kathleen. Prosecutors claimed that Drew killed Kathleen out of fear that their divorce would leave him broke. For 3 weeks, jurors heard from 44 witnesses who shared disturbing accounts of Kathleen's case. One friend mentioned that Kathleen was so scared of Drew that she kept a knife under her bed for protection. After considering all the evidence, which was mostly circumstantial and based on witness statements, the jury, made up of 7 men and 5 women, deliberated for about 14 hours. Before the jury's decision was announced, Drew shouted that he was innocent. This caused Kathleen's brother to retaliate, accusing Drew of Kathleen's murder. Security had to step in to remove him from the courtroom. Ultimately, on September 6, 2012, Drew Peterson convicted of murdering Savio. On February 21, 2013, sentencing him to 38 years in prison with no chance of parole. Though he appeared calm during the trial, Drew's attitude changed in the following days. He directed his anger at the prosecutor who helped convict him. The prosecutor, however, remained unshaken and suggested that there might be further legal actions regarding Stacy's disappearance. Tensions escalated within Drew's legal team as his lead attorney filed an appeal, claiming that the original defense team had mishandled the trial. They argued that Drew was pressured into starting a media campaign before the trial, which ultimately harmed his defense. They also criticized the choice to call Stacy's divorce attorney as a witness, a decision that proved disastrous. Despite Drew's numerous attempts to overturn the verdict, the ruling remained intact. Kathleen achieved justice, but the fate of Stacy continued to be a perplexing mystery, with many believing that Drew Peterson held the key to the answers. While serving his sentence, Drew faced a new and shocking allegation. He was recorded in prison discussing a plan to arrange a murder for hire against the prosecutor who had led his case. He offered money to another inmate in exchange for carrying out the attack. In May 2016, he was found guilty of solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire. He was subsequently sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison. Over time, Drew has maintained his innocence and persistently sought to appeal his conviction, arguing that the testimonies used during his trial violated his constitutional rights. In 2024, a significant legal development occurred when Drew's public defender requested a psychological evaluation to pursue a new trial. The judge instructed the county to conduct and finance the evaluation for Drew, who is now 70 years old. After a mandatory 30-day assessment period, the results showed that he was mentally competent to stand trial. At the same time, Drew's former attorney faced legal issues of his own, as he was charged with contempt of court. This situation arose when he allegedly breached a gag order by discussing the case in a nationally televised interview. During this interview, he claimed to have information that could clarify the circumstances surrounding Stacy's case. Although the lawyer denied the allegations, the judge reaffirmed the gag order, prohibiting him from publicly addressing the case. In the same year, Drew's eldest son, Stephen Paul Peterson, who became a police officer like his father, spoke out. He referred to Drew as his hero, highlighting that his father had always supported him and his brother. However, he confessed that dealing with the circumstances of Drew's conviction was extremely painful, making it hard for him to reconcile the loving father he had known for 36 years with the man accused of such terrible crimes. As for Drew's numerous appeals, none had been successful by that time. Stacy remained missing, and her family continued to hope that her body would eventually be found. They firmly believed that Drew was responsible for her disappearance and should be held accountable. This case generated significant public debate throughout the United States because of its many concerning elements. At its center was a police officer, an individual committed to protecting the public, who instead posed a threat to those around him. The chilling saga of Kathleen Savio's murder and Stacy Peterson's disappearance revealed a harrowing tale of abuse, manipulation, and betrayal orchestrated by Drew Peterson, a police officer entrusted with public safety. While Kathleen's justice was secured through a hard-fought conviction, Stacy's fate remains an unresolved mystery, leaving her family in anguished hope for answers. This case, marked by institutional failures and Peterson's brazen defiance, underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the enduring pursuit of truth that continues to honor the memories of Kathleen and Stacy. This story unfolds in Canada and caught public attention due to its unusual developments. Nicole Porciello, also known as Nicole Hasselman, was a 34-year-old whose kindness and patience shone through her work in student support services at Templeton Secondary School in Vancouver. She was more than just a helper, she was a true mentor to students navigating the challenges of adolescence. At Templeton, Nicole specialized in supporting students with learning disabilities, crafting individualized plans that boosted their confidence and academic success. Her ability to listen without judgment made her a trusted figure, often staying late to help with homework or offer advice on personal struggles. The school was not just a workplace for Nicole, it felt like a second family, fostering genuine connections and support. Her colleagues viewed her as an inspiration, always approachable and willing to help, whether it was covering a shift or organizing school events. She was cherished not only for her professional skills but also for the warmth she brought to her interactions, often bringing homemade treats to staff meetings to brighten their day. Beyond Templeton, Nicole was deeply rooted in her East Vancouver community, volunteering at local food drives and coaching her son's soccer team on weekends. Her love for gardening transformed her small backyard into a vibrant oasis, where she taught her son about nurturing life and patience. She enjoyed quiet evenings reading novels or watching classic films, often sharing her insights with friends over coffee. These small moments defined her, a woman who found joy in connection and growth, always striving to make those around her feel valued. Outside of work, Nicole was a dedicated mother to her 10-year-old son, Ethan, whose sensitive and kind nature mirrored her own. Nicole successfully balanced her career with motherhood, pouring her heart and effort into both. She aimed to be a positive role model for Ethan, showing him the importance of kindness and how to make the world a better place. Their evenings were filled with rituals, cooking simple meals together, playing board games, or reading bedtime stories. She taught Ethan to stand up for others, drawing from her own experiences helping students navigate bullying. Her friends marveled at her ability to juggle demanding workdays with unwavering attention to Ethan's needs, from attending his hockey games to helping with school projects. Nicole's home was a sanctuary of love. On November 16, 2018, a tragic event changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police reported a crash involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV at around 10 p.m. on Barnett Highway, a busy stretch illuminated by streetlights. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. The car was severely damaged from hitting a lamppost, its front crumpled and windshield shattered. A man was trapped inside the vehicle, and time was critical, every second counted. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the area. They worked closely with police and medical teams, understanding that any delay could result in tragedy. A nearby driver, stopped at a traffic light, later told police he heard a deafening crash and saw the SUV swerve violently before impact, sparking immediate concern. Firefighters used hydraulic tools, known as the jaws of life, to pry open the mangled driver's side door, their movements precise under pressure. The man in the car remained seated as paramedics surrounded him, preparing to provide medical assistance as soon as rescuers freed him from the wreckage. After several intense minutes, the rescue commander signaled that it was safe to pull the victim out. The man was carefully removed from the damaged car and handed over to the medics, who noted his dazed expression and minor cuts. The emergency services worked efficiently, with each team member fulfilling a crucial role. Medics quickly began administering first aid, checking the man's condition thoroughly, pulse steady, breathing normal. Once they confirmed his condition was stable, they transferred him onto a stretcher and took him to the ambulance, where they started preparing for transport to Royal Columbian Hospital. The victim's name was Jan Popel, a 41-year-old real estate agent known in Vancouver's competitive housing market. At the hospital, doctors immediately conducted a complete examination and diagnostic tests, including CT scans, to identify any hidden injuries. They documented a few bruises on his arms and a mild concussion, but thankfully, no serious injuries were found. Jan's condition was stable, and his life was not in danger. Nurses monitored his vitals closely, noting his calm demeanor despite the crash's severity. After receiving the necessary medical care, he was kept under observation for 24 hours to ensure his full recovery. Police officers stationed nearby began questioning him as soon as he was cleared, sensing inconsistencies in his initial account of a mechanical failure causing the crash. Jan Popel had built a successful career selling properties in Vancouver's booming real estate scene, known for his charm and persistence in closing deals. Born in Burnaby, he grew up in a middle-class family and showed early ambition, earning a business degree before entering real estate. Colleagues described him as driven but private, often deflecting personal questions with humor. His professional life thrived, but his personal struggles simmered beneath the surface, particularly in his relationship with Nicole. They met in 2011 at a community fundraiser, where Jan's easygoing confidence caught Nicole's attention. Their early days were filled with shared dreams, weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains, late-night talks about starting a family, and plans to buy a home together. Jan's attentiveness, like surprising Nicole with flowers after a long workday, made her feel cherished. However, his insecurities emerged within a year, triggered by Nicole's growing independence and social circle at Templeton. Jan's romantic relationship with Nicole started off very well, filled with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They envisioned a future together, made plans, and exchanged thoughts. However, over time, Jan began to show traits that concerned Nicole. What began as a caring desire to protect her gradually morphed into obsessive behavior. He claimed to be shielding her from negative outside influences, which led him to isolate her from friends and family. By 2013, Jan's need for control intensified, particularly after Nicole received a promotion at Templeton, boosting her confidence. He began questioning her late work hours, accusing her of prioritizing students over him. His actions escalated to checking her cell phone and social media accounts, demanding passwords to prove her loyalty. His jealousy was extreme, and he struggled to hide his aggression, often raising his voice during arguments over trivial matters like a colleague's text. At a 2015 family gathering, he shoved Nicole during a heated dispute over her talking to a male friend, leaving her shaken but hesitant to leave him. Nicole's sister, Lisa, later recalled warning her about Jan's temper, but Nicole believed his apologies and promises to change. Nicole and Jan's relationship lasted 7 years, marked by growing pain and fear. Specific incidents painted a troubling picture. In 2016, Jan threw Nicole's phone against a wall after seeing a friendly message from a coworker, shattering the screen. In 2017, he followed her to a school event, confronting her in the parking lot and accusing her of infidelity, an outburst witnessed by a colleague. Despite this, Nicole clung to Jan's sweet promises that things would improve, often citing his tearful apologies and vows to seek counseling. He vowed to find the strength to become the loving and trustworthy partner he once was, but these promises prevented Nicole from ending the relationship, even though she felt deep down that Jan's behavior might never change. Friends urged her to leave, but Nicole's compassion and hope kept her tethered, fearing Jan's reaction to a final breakup. They had broken up multiple times, but Jan always pleaded for another chance, and Nicole would relent, believing Ethan deserved a stable family. Their most recent breakup, which she believed would be permanent, happened on November 7, 2018, after Nicole confided in a friend about connecting with another man, seeking a healthier future. Jan was unwilling to accept the breakup. He didn't want to lose Nicole. Overwhelmed by jealousy, he parked his car in front of her house and shared compromising photos of her on social media, a humiliating act that left Nicole devastated. After Jan was removed from the car, the police started their investigation, led by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, a specialized unit for complex cases in British Columbia. They interviewed eyewitnesses, including a jogger who saw the SUV speeding erratically before the crash, and examined the accident scene in detail, collecting debris and tire marks to reconstruct the sequence of events. Their questions were designed to uncover the real causes of the crash, suspecting it was no accident. Meanwhile, firefighters finished their tasks and began to pack up their equipment before returning to the station. However, one officer, sweeping the perimeter with a flashlight, made a startling discovery. About 30 feet away from the car, in a muddy ditch obscured by bushes, lay a woman who was unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. Her clothes were torn, and blood soaked her jacket, alarming rescuers who immediately called for a second ambulance. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, noting weak vitals and severe trauma. She was rushed to Royal Columbian Hospital, where the medical team performed emergency surgery to address massive internal bleeding. At the hospital, Nicole's condition was critical from the moment she arrived. Doctors identified multiple stab wounds, some penetrating vital organs, and worked tirelessly to save her. Her family, notified by police, gathered in the waiting room, clinging to hope as updates grew bleaker. Carmine, her brother, paced anxiously, while her father, Joe, sat in stunned silence, grappling with the suddenness of the crisis. The medical team's efforts, including blood transfusions and surgical interventions, were ultimately unable to save her life, and Nicole was pronounced dead at 3:17 a.m. on November 17, 2018. Her death sent shockwaves through the hospital staff, many of whom knew her from community events, and left her family in a state of profound disbelief. A few days later, police released a statement. Nicole died from injuries sustained in an SUV crash in Burnaby last week, but authorities discovered evidence suggesting foul play. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took charge, coordinating with forensic experts to analyze the scene. An autopsy was performed on Nicole's body at a forensic laboratory shortly after her death. An experienced medical examiner, familiar with such cases, carefully examined and documented the numerous injuries on her body. He found a total of 47 stab wounds, some deep and inflicted with significant force, penetrating her chest and abdomen, while others appeared more superficial, suggesting she had struggled to defend herself. The examination revealed that the wounds were made by two different knives, one a serrated kitchen knife, the other a smaller paring knife, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Blood spatter analysis suggested the stabbing occurred inside the vehicle before the crash. The examiner understood that his findings would be crucial in helping law enforcement identify the perpetrator and bring them to justice, providing a clear link to Jan Popel's presence in the SUV. After the autopsy, forensic teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA, and the knives recovered from the vehicle. The official report compiled all expert findings, including toxicology results showing no substances in Nicole's system, ruling out intoxication as a factor. This report was not just a document, it became a crucial element in the murder investigation, providing investigators with essential information to move forward. It hit detectives cross-referenced phone records, revealing Jan's threatening texts to Nicole days before the murder, and secured surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing the SUV's erratic path. Interviews with Nicole's friends confirmed Jan's abusive history, including a coworker who witnessed his 2017 outburst, bolstering the case. In the wake of Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were overwhelmed with deep sorrow that hit them unexpectedly and intensely. It was incredibly difficult for her family to accept that they would never again hug their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or create new memories together. Joe Porciello, Nicole's father, withdrew into grief, haunted by memories of her infectious smile. Lisa, her sister, struggled to explain the loss to Ethan, who asked daily when his mother would return. Nicole's friends, who had shared her most heartfelt dreams and experiences, felt they had lost a true companion. They remembered how hard she had worked to rebuild her life, start anew, and pursue her happiness, particularly after years of enduring Jan's control. At Templeton, teachers and students created a memorial garden in Nicole's honor, planting her favorite sunflowers as a tribute to her nurturing spirit. The school's principal issued a statement praising Nicole's dedication, noting how she transformed lives with her empathy. The holidays were particularly difficult for Nicole's family. Her brother, Carmine Porciello, felt he would never fully accept that his little sister was gone. During family dinners, "It's impossible not to notice her empty seat," he said, indicating where she would have sat, her absence a palpable void. Ethan, now living with his grandparents, withdrew from hockey, struggling to process his mother's absence. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils and fundraisers to support Ethan's future, a testament to Nicole's widespread influence. On November 29, 2018, Jan Popel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Porciello's death. A hit confirmed the incident was isolated, involving known parties, posing no threat to public safety. Detectives worked hard to gather and secure all evidence, including Jan's blood-stained jacket and the video he recorded, which became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Reconstructing the timeline of events was vital to the investigation. A hit's analysis of surveillance footage, phone records, and text messages clarified Nicole's whereabouts and Jan's actions. A chilling text from Jan on November 15th read, "You'll regret leaving me," contradicting his claim of an amicable split. This organization of details revealed inconsistencies in Jan's statements, such as his assertion that the crash was accidental, and allowed investigators to assess his premeditated intent. As previously noted, Nicole and Jan's relationship spanned several years, marked by a pattern of breakups and reconciliations. 9 days before her death, Nicole told Jan their relationship was over, confiding in a friend about her hope for a new start with another man, which amplified Jan's jealousy immensely. On the evening of November 16th, Jan picked up Nicole in a rental car while Ethan was at hockey practice. They got into an argument, during which Jan pulled out 2 kitchen knives and stabbed Nicole repeatedly in the passenger seat. Instead of calling for help, Jan took off his bloody jacket, used his phone to record a video, and tried to capture the moment in a misguided attempt to document her suffering. In the video, Nicole could be heard gasping, "He loves she," but Jan showed no remorse, saying, "She brought this on herself." He claimed he stabbed her because he couldn't accept her moving on. After the attack, Jan drove home, leaving Nicole bleeding in the car while he went inside to send emails, including one resigning from his job. For 2 hours, as Nicole clung to life, Jan paid bills and shopped online for a TV and dishwasher, actions later described by prosecutors as callously indifferent. When he returned to the rental car, finding Nicole still alive, he allegedly decided to stage a crash to mask the murder. When Jan accelerated rapidly and crashed into a streetlight, Nicole, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle, landing in the ditch where she was found. The deliberate high-speed impact, confirmed by skid marks, supported a hit's theory of premeditation. As a result of the gathered evidence, Jan faced charges of second-degree murder. The legal process began with a preliminary hearing in 2019, but Jan's guilty plea on December 15, 2020, expedited proceedings, avoiding a full trial. Sentencing hearings, held in March and April 2021, were a difficult time for Nicole's family and friends, who filled the Vancouver courtroom seeking closure. During the sentencing, a video recorded by Jan after stabbing Nicole was shown to the court. The judge, Justice Kathleen Kerr, cautioned that it contained graphic content and urged anyone who might feel uncomfortable to exit. The 1-minute video depicted Nicole, severely injured and struggling to breathe, while Jan accused her of disrespecting him. "You just took from me and disrespected me for months and years," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Nicole's father, Joe, visibly upset, left the courtroom, unable to bear the footage. As the video played, Jan sat with his head down in the prisoner's dock. Carmine yelled, "Look at the video. Raise your head," prompting Justice Kerr to call a 15-minute break to ease tensions. After the video, 4 victim impact statements were shared. Joe described Nicole as a beautiful soul and the foundation of their family, saying, "He has destroyed our family. We cannot forgive him for what he has done." Carmine expressed that the crime left him feeling like a zombie, filled with anger and rage. Ethan, through a written statement read by a counselor, shared that his mother was his best friend and that he felt a part of his heart was lost. Nicole's friend, Sarah, spoke of her infectious positivity, urging the court to honor her memory with justice. Justice Kerr characterized Jan's actions as heartless, cruel, and self-centered, but noted his guilty plea as a sign of limited remorse. Joe disagreed, telling reporters Jan seemed unfazed, like he was on a lunch break. Jan Popel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The Crown sought 15 years before parole eligibility, citing the crime's brutality and Jan's abusive history, while his attorney argued for 10 years, emphasizing his plea. Neither option comforted Nicole's family, particularly her cousin, Gina Iuliano, who believed first-degree murder charges, with a minimum 25 years, were warranted given the premeditation. In the week before sentencing, Nicole's friends and family launched a social media campaign, Justice for Nicole, to highlight her death's impact and demand stricter domestic violence laws. Posts shared her story, photos from school events, and calls for systemic change, gaining thousands of supporters. In a statement to the court, Jan expressed regret, claiming he'd never meant for this to happen. On April 13, 2021, Justice Kerr sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years, balancing the crime's severity with his plea. Nicole's family felt the sentence was too lenient, telling reporters outside the courthouse that Canada's justice system failed victims of domestic violence. Gina vowed to advocate for tougher laws, joining local groups to raise awareness. Nicole Porciello's vibrant life, marked by her unwavering kindness and dedication as a mother and mentor, was brutally ended on November 16, 2018, by Jan Popel's jealousy-fueled violence. While Popel's life sentence with 15 years until parole brought some justice, Nicole's family deems it insufficient, their pain deepened by her absence at family dinners. Her legacy endures through the love she instilled in her son and the students she guided at Templeton Secondary School, where her warmth remains a guiding light. The family's social media campaign and outspoken grief have sparked calls for stronger protections against domestic violence, ensuring Nicole's memory fuels a fight for justice. Though her loss leaves an unfillable void, Nicole's spirit inspires a commitment to a safer, kinder world. In October 1975, the murder of 15-year-old Martha Elizabeth Moxley shocked the town of Greenwich, Connecticut. Her body was found brutally beaten with a golf club, which was traced back to the home of a well-known family with political ties. This tragic event caused years of anguish for the Moxley family as they sought justice for their daughter's death. Let's go back in time. The Moxley family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, hoping to find a safe environment for their children, John and Martha. Their parents allowed them to explore the town freely, trusting in their safety. Martha was a remarkable teenager known for her beauty and intelligence. She had a vibrant personality and a close bond with her brother. Throughout her childhood, Martha showed impressive intellect. Her love for reading and writing reflected her passion for knowledge. Martha was well liked by her peers because of her outstanding qualities. Her lively and friendly nature helped her make many friends. She often found herself at the center of social gatherings. After the Moxley family moved to their new home in Greenwich, Martha continued to excel in school. Her commitment to her studies showed through her excellent grades and achievements. She had a natural gift for critical thinking and problem solving, distinguishing her from her classmates. Martha's aspirations went beyond academics. She wanted to impact the world through her writing. Her love for storytelling and her talent for expressing ideas clearly made her a strong candidate for a journalism career. October 30th was recognized as Mischief Night in Greenwich. During this tradition, children and teens engaged in playful mischief, often causing minor disturbances in their neighborhoods. The night typically involved activities like vandalism, property damage, and pranks. Eager to join in the fun, Martha Moxley spent the evening playing toilet papering over houses with her friends. It was a joyful night filled with laughter and innocent entertainment among the teenagers. Among the partygoers was 17-year-old Thomas Skakel, the nephew of Ethel Kennedy, who is the widow of former U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was one of the most powerful and well-known political families in the United States from the 1960s to the early 1990s. Their name became closely associated with American politics, impacting all areas of society. President John F. Kennedy was viewed as a symbol of youthful energy and change, captivating the nation with his charisma. His administration made important advances in space exploration, civil rights, and foreign policy. After John's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy took on the role of leader for the family's political ambitions, known for his commitment to social justice and strong support for the civil rights movement. Robert's assassination added to the sorrow of the already mourning Kennedy family. However, their involvement in various scandals and controversies has damaged their reputation and overshadowed their political legacy. Sources indicate that Martha Moxley and Thomas Skakel were flirting and even kissing on the night she disappeared. The last sighting of Martha was around 9:30 p.m. when she was with Thomas near the pool in his backyard. After that, no one knew where she was until a shocking discovery was made the next morning, which stunned the entire community. On October 31st, the day after Mischief Night, Martha Moxley's body was discovered under a tree in her yard. Her clothing and underwear were pulled down to her ankles, but the medical examiner found no signs of abuse assault. Nearby, pieces of a 6-iron golf club were located, which became a key piece of evidence in understanding the circumstances surrounding Martha's death. The chief medical examiner of Connecticut performed an autopsy on Martha. His findings revealed disturbing details. Martha had multiple scalp lacerations, skull fractures, and injuries to her brain. The absence of signs of a struggle led the medical examiner to determine that Martha had been violently assaulted. The medical examiner determined that the weapon that caused her injuries and death was a 6-iron golf club, which matched evidence collected at the scene. The severity of her injuries and the strong evidence linking the golf club to the murder confirmed that her death was neither an accident nor an end to her own life. They classified Martha's death as a homicide. Witnesses reported seeing Martha with Thomas Skakel on the night she died, raising suspicions and directing detectives' focus towards the Skakel family. An investigation later found that the golf club used to kill Martha originated from the Skakel home, which further increased doubts about the involvement of the two Skakel brothers. Although the investigation made initial progress, it soon stalled due to interference from the Skakel family. They interfered with the investigation right from the beginning. One significant way they obstructed progress was by blocking the police from accessing their son's school medical records. These records could have shed light on Thomas Skakel's behavior and any health issues he might have had at the time of the crime. By denying investigators this information, the Skakel family hindered the exploration of potential motives. Thomas's father took further actions to impede the investigation. He discouraged witnesses from stepping forward or sharing what they knew about the crime, making it challenging for investigators to gather first-hand testimonies. This interference also significantly hampered the progress of the investigation. When news of Martha's murder emerged, Thomas and Michael Skakel, grandsons of Robert F. Kennedy, became targets of intense media scrutiny. Reporters and the public were eager to uncover any potential involvement or connections to Martha's death. As members of the Kennedy family, the brothers faced overwhelming speculation. Throughout the investigation, Thomas and Michael maintained their innocence, asserting that they had no involvement in Martha's murder. They consistently denied being at the party where she was killed and claimed ignorance about the circumstances of her death. Their repeated denials attracted even more media attention and public interest in the case. However, despite the extensive coverage, there was no solid evidence linking the brothers to Martha's murder. The murder of Martha Moxley attracted worldwide attention because of the involvement of the Kennedy family. Initially, attention turned to Kenneth Littleton, who was hired as a tutor by the Skakel family just hours before Martha's murder. Littleton was a live-in tutor for the Skakel brothers, and since he was present near the crime scene, he was suspected of being an accomplice. His interactions with the brothers were examined, and some believed he might have influenced them to commit the crime. As time passed, the testimonies from Thomas and Michael Skakel about that night began to change. Witnesses reported that Michael had confessed to killing Martha with a golf club. Additionally, a former classmate of Michael claimed he received preferential treatment and boasted about escaping punishment for the murder because of his ties to the Kennedy family. Many books have been written about the Moxley murder in an effort to uncover the truth about her death. One notable book is A Season in Purgatory by acclaimed author Dominic Dunn, which focuses on the Moxley murder case. Dunn conducted thorough research to provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Martha's death. Another significant book, Murder in Greenwich by Mark Furman, a former police detective known, presents his perspective on the investigation and various theories surrounding the case. These books examine different theories proposed by investigators and advocates for justice for Martha. Despite significant media and public interest, The case remained unsolved, which caused frustration for both investigators and the public. The tragic death of Martha Moxley shocked the community and led to a lengthy investigation that lasted nearly 2 decades. In 1998, a jury was assembled to examine the circumstances of her murder. After a thorough inquiry lasting almost 2 years, there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with the crime. In January 2000, police issued an arrest warrant for Michael, who then turned himself in. He was soon released on bail after posting a $500,000 bond. On March 14, 2000, Michael was arraigned in juvenile court. Although he was 15 years old when Martha was murdered, the judge decided to try him as an adult. Michael Skakel's trial began on May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut. Prosecutors built a strong case by presenting evidence linking him to the crime and highlighting inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense maintained that Michael was innocent, arguing he was at a cousin's house when the murder occurred. The murder trial of Martha Moxley received extensive media coverage, drawing attention from both national outlets and the local community. Many people were invested in the case, hoping for justice for the victim. During the trial, the prosecution introduced a book proposal that suggested his involvement in the crime. In this proposal, Michael admitted to engaging in inappropriate behavior while in a tree on the night of the murder. Although he acknowledged being at the crime scene, he did not confess to directly harming Martha. Ultimately, on June 7, 2002, Michael Skakel was convicted of Moxley's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to Garner Correctional Facility in Newtown, Connecticut. Reactions to the verdict were mixed, with some individuals feeling satisfied and others raising concerns. Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, presenting several arguments. One of his main points was that the trial should have occurred in juvenile court instead of superior court, as he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He contended that his age should have prevented him from being charged as an adult. Furthermore, Skakel claimed that the prosecution committed misconduct by not disclosing crucial evidence that could have exonerated him, which he argued violated his due process rights and compromised the fairness of his trial. Nevertheless, in January 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed his claims and upheld his conviction. In 2007, Michael Skakel hired a new attorney and requested a retrial in Connecticut court, proposing a new theory regarding Martha Moxley's murder. His defense team presented evidence implying that Gitano Tony Bryant, cousin of Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant and former classmate of Michael at Brunswick Private School in Greenwich. In an August 2003 videotaped interview with Vito Colucci, a private investigator hired by Michael, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had tried to molest her. Bryant said he had not come forward because his mother had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. A 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed this oral evidence to be presented, along with other matters. In September 2007, Michael's attorneys filed a motion, based in part on Bryant's complaints, for a new trial. Official prosecutors responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a drama about the case. During this period, Michael's defense team appointed several full-time investigators to examine case details, hoping to uncover new evidence that would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, their efforts were hindered when a Supreme Court judge rejected Michael's request for a new trial, stating that Bryant's testimony lacked credibility and that there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecutors during Michael's initial trial. Michael's attorneys once again appealed this ruling to the Connecticut Supreme Court. In 2009, a panel of 5 judges listened to the appeal, but a year later, on April 12, 2010, they ruled 4-1 against Michael. Despite these challenges, Michael and his legal team remained determined to secure his freedom. In January 2012, they requested a sentence reduction, arguing that he had been an exemplary prisoner and warranted leniency. However, this request was denied, and Michael's sentence continued to stand. In 2013, Michael Skakel appealed his conviction, claiming that his trial attorney, Michael Sherman, had not provided effective representation. During the hearing, Michael Skakel accused Sherman of lacking interest in his defense and being more focused on collecting fees to resolve his financial issues. This raised serious doubts about the fairness of his trial and the potential for a wrongful conviction. As a result, Michael was granted a new trial after it was determined that Sherman had not adequately defended him during his 2002 trial. On November 21, 2013, Michael Skakel was released on $1.2 million bail with other conditions. He must be monitored with a GPS device, have no contact with the Moxley family, must be checked in periodically by phone, and will not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless permission is granted, although he later moved to Westchester County, New York. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's murder conviction in a 4-3 majority decision, writing that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation was adequate. In January 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke Michael's bail and return him to prison to continue serving his sentence. However, on May 4th, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated Skakel's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court ruled that Sherman had provided ineffective assistance when he failed to contact an alibi witness named by Michael and that Michael had therefore been deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stamford have the right to seek a new trial for Michael. This ruling surprised many in the legal community and rekindled questions about the true circumstances of the crime. Despite the possibility of a new trial, in October 2020, the chief state attorney informed the Supreme Court that they would not retry Michael Skakel for Martha's murder. This decision came after a thorough review of the evidence. This decision marked the end of a lengthy legal battle that spanned decades and left many unanswered questions about the murder of Martha Moxley. In 2023, Michael Skakel filed lawsuits against the police investigator in Greenwich. The lawsuits alleged malicious prosecution and violations of constitutional rights. According to Michael's attorney, the fact that Michael spent over 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit meant he could never be compensated for that lost time. Michael's lawsuits claimed that the lead investigator did not perform their duties properly, acted unethically, and intimidated witnesses during interviews, alleged that the investigator threatened witnesses to make them give false statements. These accusations raised significant concerns about the integrity of the investigation and the validity of Michael Skakel's conviction. Furthermore, the lawsuits argued that the investigator sought to profit from Michael's case, indicating that they were working on a book and film about Michael's supposed involvement in Martha's murder while continuing the investigation. Martha's brother, John, was shocked by the news of Michael's freedom and struggles to grasp the reasoning behind the court's decision. He is convinced that Michael Skakel is guilty and insists that just because Michael is free, it doesn't mean he is innocent. Instead, it reflects the judge's decisions and legal technicalities. In John's view, Michael Skakel killed his sister, a belief he holds firmly. Even though Michael is no longer in prison, John believes he will always be mentally imprisoned, tormented by his actions for the rest of his life. The Oxygen created a powerful documentary exploring the details of Martha Moxley's murder. The Moxley family chose to be part of the documentary to honor Martha and promote the truth about her case. Over the years, many theories have emerged regarding Martha Moxley's death. One of the key suspects is Michael Skakel. Several motives have been suggested for his alleged involvement, including jealousy and anger. Martha had a close friendship with Michael's brother, Thomas Skakel, which might have fueled Michael's resentment towards her. It has also been speculated that Michael may have seen a meeting between Martha and Thomas that triggered feelings of insecurity. Another suspect is Thomas Skakel himself. One theory proposes that he may have killed Martha out of jealousy or rage, especially since she reportedly rejected his advances. Additionally, their family tutor, Kenneth Littleton, has been considered a possible suspect. Others believe that her murderer was simply someone who happened to be passing by. Proponents of these theories argue that Michael Skakel was an easy target and that the true murderer has not yet been caught. On October 19, 2021, a cool autumn day in Wood Street, Kettering, a peaceful market town in Northamptonshire. Wood Street, with its simple homes and ghost houses, was alive with the usual sounds of everyday life, neighbors chatting, cars passing by, children returning home from school. But just after noon, that tranquility was shattered. Marta Kmieleka, a 31-year-old woman whose life was cut short, leaving her community in turmoil and her family forever altered. Northamptonshire police received a call expressing concern for a person's welfare at a residence on Wood Street. A family member had not heard from their loved one for several days and sensed that something was wrong. Officers arrived expecting to conduct a routine welfare check. They forced their way into a rented room and discovered a scene that initiated one of the town's most disturbing crime investigations. Marta was dead. The small, cluttered room was filled with secrets that would take months to uncover. What happened here? The police cordoned off the street, and neighbors watched in shock as forensic teams arrived. Residents from nearby told reporters they had never witnessed anything like this in Kettering. A neighbor expressed his disbelief. Wood Street was meant to be a safe place where nothing significant ever occurred. To reconstruct the timeline of Marta's last hours, investigators analyzed surveillance footage, which became a key piece of evidence. Detectives focused on a crucial time, the night of October 15th, just 4 days before Marta's body was discovered. So, who was she? Marta was a lively, kind, and independent woman who greatly impacted those around her. Marta grew up in Bydgoszcz, a vibrant city in northern Poland known for its charming riverside and close-knit communities. Her family considered her full of life, always smiling, and eager to help. Marta had a special ability to make people feel valued, whether she was assisting a neighbor with groceries or enjoying long conversations with friends over coffee. Her brother and sister-in-law, who later spoke at her inquest, described her as the glue of their family, someone who was always ready to help without needing to be asked. In Poland, Marta had a strong relationship with her parents, especially her father. Friends referred to her as a daddy's girl, not because she was spoiled, but because of the close and unwavering bond they had. She would call her father just to share her day. He listened with pride as he watched her grow into a confident woman. Marta also loved her brother's children and took her aunt duties seriously. She would spoil them with small gifts, play with them, or simply listen to their stories. Her family said she had a natural warmth that made everyone feel valued. At around 25 years old, Marta met Paweł Kmieleki, who was a few years her senior. Paweł was charming, confident, and had a passion for cars, particularly BMWs, which he loved to showcase. Paweł was drawn to her lively personality. Their friends noted that they seemed like an ideal couple. Marta's outgoing nature balanced Paweł's more reserved demeanor. They bonded over common interests like music, weekend trips, and dreams of a life outside of Poland. For Marta, who was always eager to explore and ambitious, Paweł appeared to be a partner who shared her aspirations for new adventures. Their relationship progressed quickly. After dating for a couple of years, they were ready to move forward. On July 29, 2016, Marta and Paweł married in a small, joyful ceremony in Bydgoszcz. The day was filled with family, laughter, and Polish traditions. Marta's family, especially her father, was delighted to see her so happy. The couple settled into their married life by renting an apartment in Bydgoszcz. For a while, it seemed like the life Marta had dreamed of, stable, loving, and aimed at a bright future. Marta and Paweł had ambitious goals. They sought more than what Bydgoszcz could provide. They wanted opportunities for personal growth, better earnings, and a chance to immerse themselves in a new culture. In 2017, they decided to take a significant step. They moved to England. They chose Kettering, a small town in Northamptonshire, partly because Marta's brother and his family already lived there. This move was a big leap for them. They packed their belongings, said farewells to their families, and arrived in the UK with optimism. Kettering, with its peaceful streets and supportive Polish community, felt like the perfect place for a fresh start. They rented a home together, explored their new surroundings, began building a new life. They enjoyed their time in Kettering by going for walks and visiting local cafes and bars. Initially, the move seemed to deepen their relationship. Marta embraced her new life in Kettering, finding a job and making friends, while Paweł also adapted to his work. They often hosted dinners for Marta's brother and his children, with Marta happily playing the role of an aunt by bringing games and treats. Social media posts from that period captured their joy, showcasing them smiling with each other and sharing captions about their new adventures. Beneath the seemingly perfect moments, problems were emerging. Powell, who had always been somewhat possessive, began to show a controlling behavior that Marta hadn't fully recognized back in Poland. He started questioning her whereabouts, the people she spent time with, and why she was making new friends. Marta, who valued her independence, struggled with being monitored. She wanted to live freely, not just exist under Powell's watch. As time passed, Powell's jealousy intensified. He was no longer just protective, he had become obsessive. While Marta was flourishing and expanding her social network within Kettering's Polish community, Powell couldn't cope. He bombarded her with texts to find out her plans and would often show up unexpectedly where she was with friends. Those around her noticed that she didn't seem like herself anymore. Her usual vibrancy had faded. While Marta shrugged it off, saying Powell was just stressed or adjusting to life in England, her close friends could see the underlying tension. Though Marta always wore a smile, her family later revealed that she had spoken to them about Powell's behavior, hinting at arguments that left her feeling trapped. The tension between Powell and Marta escalated from emotional to physical abuse. Court records later showed 3 incidents of Powell's aggression toward Marta, one in August 2020, another during Easter 2021, and a third in September 2021, just weeks before the tragedy. These incidents were not isolated, they were part of a recurring pattern. Though always a strong-willed person, Marta began to fear the man she once loved. She confided in friends that she no longer recognized Powell. She felt suffocated by his jealousy. Despite her fears, she stayed with him, perhaps hoping for change or feeling burdened by their shared past. Powell's controlling behavior extended beyond their home as he harassed Marta's friends and tried to monitor her whereabouts, even stalking her by appearing at her workplace or waiting outside places she visited. By mid-2020, their marriage was falling apart. Marta moved out and found her own place in Kettering, determined to rebuild her life. She began to share her journey of personal growth on social media. Just 5 days before her life ended, she posted a photo with a caption in Polish: "One of the worst mistakes a person can make is wasting years of life waiting for another person to change or develop." This bold statement signified her desire to move on. She started dating again, forming a new relationship with a colleague and planning a future without Powell. Powell was not willing to let Marta go. He continued to text, call, and try to involve himself in her life, even as she tried to distance herself from him. Marta repeatedly pleaded with Powell through messages, asking him to stop contacting her. During their investigation, the police found clear evidence of Powell's obsessive behavior. His messages ranged from desperate pleas to threats, showing his refusal to accept that Marta wanted to end things. Her family, especially her brother and sister-in-law, became aware of her increasing discomfort. When she visited them, still remaining a caring aunt to their children, there was a noticeable sadness in her eyes. She was trying to break free, but Powell's presence felt overwhelming. Marta wasn't just ending a marriage, she was escaping from a constraint. The process of breaking up wasn't instantaneous, but involved careful, intentional actions. She began by creating distance, reducing contact, and staying away from places where Powell might be. Marta shared her plans to divorce Powell, whose name was on their official marriage registered in Poland, with her brother and sister-in-law who lived nearby. She had started gathering the necessary paperwork, which involved coordinating with lawyers back in Bydgoszcz. Additionally, Marta found support from her friends in Kettering's Polish community. They surrounded her with invitations to dinners, gym sessions, and social outings, helping her reclaim the joy that Powell had suppressed. Powell was unable to let go. His jealousy, which had already caused him pain, developed into an obsession. He refused to accept that his relationship with Marta was over and continued to reach out to her despite her efforts to distance herself. Detective Superintendent later observed that Powell's actions became increasingly desperate. He bombarded Marta with calls and texts, sometimes pleading for another chance and at other times accusing her of betrayal. When she blocked his number, he resorted to using different phones or contacting her friends to gather information about her whereabouts. He would frequently appear at her favorite cafes or hang around her workplace, hoping to encounter her unexpectedly. Marta's friends noticed that she was becoming more anxious. She often looked over her shoulder when she was out. His behavior escalated to stalking. He would follow her from a distance, watching her every move, and once trailed her from her workplace to a friend's house, only leaving after being confronted by her friend. Marta confided in her brother that she felt trapped, as if Powell was always nearby. By October 2021, Marta was doing well despite the influence of Powell. She was excitedly planning a Christmas trip to Poland to visit her father, looking forward to her mother's visit to Kettering, and enjoying a new relationship. On Friday, October 15th, she spent the evening with friends, laughing and texting as they enjoyed drinks together at a local bar. She left around 10:40 p.m., looking sharp and confident as always. However, that night, something unexpected happened. On Monday, October 18th, Marta did not show up for work, which was out of character for her. Her colleagues, who were accustomed to her punctuality, became concerned. Her brother also grew anxious when she didn't answer his calls. The situation escalated when Marta's family received a text from her phone that sounded unusual. It was overly formal and lacked her typical warmth, suggesting it was written by someone else. Her sister-in-law, feeling that something was seriously wrong, suspected that Powell might be involved due to his history of controlling behavior. On Tuesday, October 19th, Marta's sister-in-law visited Powell's rented room on Wood Street. When nobody answered the door, her anxiety grew. She called emergency service to express her concerns about Marta's safety and mentioned Powell's previous aggressive behavior. The Northamptonshire police acted quickly, sending officers to perform a welfare check at the location. What they discovered was shocking. The officers forced their way into Powell's room, breaking down the door. Inside, they found Marta's lifeless body wrapped in a blood-stained duvet. She had suffered 32 sharp force injuries, including cuts to her neck, face, shoulders, and chest, with defensive wounds on her right hand, suggesting that she had fought back. Next to her was Powell, bleeding heavily from up to 9 self-inflicted wounds on his throat. The police immediately secured the area and called for paramedics. Marta was pronounced dead at the scene, her hopes for a new life shattered. Powell, still alive, was taken to the hospital. On October 21st, after confirming that his injuries were not life-threatening, Powell Kmielewski was arrested while in his hospital bed. The detective mentioned that Powell was uncooperative during the investigation. He also noted Powell's initial denial of any previous aggression towards Marta. When detectives interviewed Powell, he remained silent and did not provide any explanation for the events that took place in his room. They questioned him about Marta's final days, her unexplained absence from work, and a suspicious text message, but he revealed nothing, adding to the mystery. Questions arose. Why did Marta visit his room that night? Had Powell lured her there? What led to such a tragic outcome? Investigators established a timeline, revealing that Marta had not been seen since October 15th, and her body had likely been in Powell's room for nearly 4 days. During this time, Powell continued with his daily routine as if nothing had happened. A text sent from Marta's phone emerged as a significant clue, indicating that Powell may have attempted to conceal his involvement. Marta's family, particularly her brother and sister-in-law, were devastated. They had warned her to avoid Powell, but none could have anticipated the depths of his desperation. The investigation into Marta's death relied heavily on tangible evidence, with the security camera footage from Wood Street and surrounding areas being the most telling. Northamptonshire police thoroughly searched CCTV and Ring doorbell recordings, which provided a disturbing glimpse into Marta's final moments. On Friday, October 15th, 2021, Marta spent the evening at her friend's house on Woodland Court, enjoying herself and having a good time. She was texting, laughing, and sharing flirtatious messages with a colleague she was dating. At the same time, she received persistent messages from Powell, who was urging her to come over to his place and even asked her to bring pizza. The previous day, she had told him off in a message and requested that he leave her alone. Despite this, Powell continued to text her and reached out to a mutual friend to find out if Marta was here. Upon confirming her location, he decided to act. At 10:42 p.m., Marta left her friend's house, walking alone along Wood Street towards Rockingham Road. Security footage showed her walking confidently, dressed for a night out and carrying a small bag. However, just a few minutes later, around 10:45 p.m., cameras revealed Powell leaving his rented room and heading towards Bath Road, intentionally moving to intersect her path. Powell was recorded leaving his home on Wood Street to find Marta, as noted by Northamptonshire police based on footage from near Wilson Terrace. The video showed a struggle between them. Marta appeared to be walking normally at first, but then seemed to resist when Powell grabbed her arm. She stumbled and briefly fell, coughing and unsteady on her feet. Audio from a Ring doorbell captured her labored coughs along with Powell's cold command, "Come on, not far now. Can you hear me?" He was seen forcefully guiding her, at one point lifting her in a bear hug as she struggled to walk. By 10:56 p.m., the low-quality footage showed them entering his house, and that was the last time anyone but Powell saw Marta alive. Inside that room, the situation became increasingly unclear, but Powell's interactions with Marta's phone revealed important information. At 11:01 p.m., just 5 minutes after they arrived, Powell took a photo of Marta lying on the floor. It's uncertain if she was already injured at that time. Approximately 90 minutes later, around 12:30 a.m. on October 16th, he captured images of messages between Marta and her new boyfriend on her phone that confirmed her new relationship. Powell's fixation on Marta's new life, especially her relationship with her new boyfriend, drove his actions. He didn't just spy on her, he went further by using Marta's phone to send messages in an effort to hide his involvement. He texted her friends and family, imitating her writing style to create the illusion that she was still alive. One particular message sent to her family was noticeably formal, unlike Marta's usual warm and casual tone, which raised suspicions. These messages were part of Powell's strategy to delay any suspicion and buy himself time while he remained in the room with Marta's body for nearly 4 days. Marta was last seen alive at 10:56 p.m. on October 15th, when she entered Powell's room. Detectives suspect she died shortly after, likely before midnight, based on a photo Powell took at 11:01 p.m. and the extent of her 32 stab wounds. The injuries to her neck were determined to be the cause of death in the autopsy. The following day, he used Marta's phone to send messages to her male contacts, pretending to be her and attempting to entice them into intimate encounters. On October 17th, just 2 days after Marta's death, surveillance cameras captured him casually walking to a nearby shop to buy 6 cans of beer and a soft drink before returning to his room. He showed no signs of grief, seamlessly blending into the daily life of Kettering while Marta's body lay covered in a blood-stained duvet. This footage was incriminating, revealing a man capable not only of murder but also of continuing his life as if nothing had happened. Powell was arrested on October 21st after his condition stabilized. He faced murder charges, and the evidence against him, CCTV footage, phone records, and forensic analysis, was substantial. Prosecutors presented his motive as jealousy and an inability to accept Marta's new life. He had expressed to friends that he couldn't bear the thought of anyone else being intimate with her, a feeling that ultimately led to his final act. By March 3, 2022, when Powell Kmielewski appeared in Northampton Crown Court and confessed to murdering Marta, the case had already captured the attention of the Kettering community and beyond. His guilty plea eliminated the need for a lengthy trial, which spared Marta's family from the pain of recounting every detail in court. The focus then shifted to a sentencing hearing on September 6, 2023, aimed at determining Powell's punishment and allowing Marta's loved ones to express their grief. Marta's brother and sister-in-law sat in the gallery, visibly heartbroken as they awaited the verdict on the punishment Powell would face for taking her life. The prosecution, represented by Northamptonshire Police and the Crown Prosecution Service, presented a strong argument for a tough sentence. They claimed that Powell's actions were not just a momentary impulse, but rather the result of an ongoing pattern of control and obsession. They highlighted the 7 defensive wounds on Marta's right hand as evidence that she fought for her life. The prosecution also referenced Powell's history of domestic abuse, mentioning incidents from August 2020, Easter 2021, and September 2021 to illustrate his increasing aggression. In 2020, he confronted Marta at her workplace on Rockingham Road about her connections with other men, forcibly took her phone to search for evidence of infidelity, then punched her multiple times, resulting in bruises on her back and face, along with a cut lip. Although the police were contacted and Marta initially gave a statement, she later retracted it. Powell offered an apology to his wife through a community resolution process. Marta left him in September that year, but the harassment persisted with continued phone calls and messages. In Easter 2021, he became aggressive during a family party, pushing her. 3 months before her death, he found Marta at the pub, grabbed her arm, and threatened her. The next month, he was reported for harassment. Marta lived in constant fear, telling friends that she was afraid Powell might kill her. Despite her efforts to escape, like moving out, planning to divorce him in Poland, and pleading with him to leave her alone, he continued to stalk and manipulate her, even sending deceptive texts from her phone to avoid raising suspicion. The prosecution highlighted Powell's lack of remorse, noting that he remained with Marta's body for almost 4 days. Powell initially denied his history of abuse while attempting to manipulate the court proceedings. They urged for a life sentence with a lengthy minimum term, arguing that Powell's actions deserved no mercy. On the other hand, Powell's defense team had limited options due to his guilty plea and the strong evidence against him. With the help of an interpreter, they acknowledged the seriousness of his crime but requested a shorter minimum term. They claimed that Powell's actions were impulsive, driven by emotional distress from his divorce and Marta's new relationship. The defense argued that he was deeply affected by the breakup, citing his self-inflicted wounds as signs of remorse or mental anguish. They contended that, although the attack was horrific, it was not premeditated and that Powell's guilty plea had spared the family from a trial. However, these arguments were weak compared to the prosecution's evidence of Powell's calculated stalking and the brutality of the attack. On September 6, 2023, Judge Herbert announced the verdict. Powell Kmielewski was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 18 years and 4 months. The judge directly addressed Powell, stating, "It was a prolonged and violent attack driven entirely by anger and jealousy." He stressed Marta's fear, noting, "The evidence clearly shows that Marta did not feel safe with you and feared you might kill her." The judge cautioned that Powell might never be released, as his eligibility for parole would be based on the parole board's evaluation of his risk to the public. This means that at 40 years old, Powell would be at least 58 before he could apply for parole, reflecting the serious nature of his crime. Marta's family felt the deep impact of the case. Her brother and sister-in-law, who were present at the sentencing, shared a moving statement through Northamptonshire police, expressing that no sentence could alleviate their suffering. However, they found a small sense of closure in knowing that Powell was held accountable for his actions. Marta Kmielewski's life, marked by warmth, resilience, and a pursuit of freedom, was tragically cut short by Powell Kmielewski's jealousy and violence, leaving her family and the Kettering community in profound grief. The sentencing of Powell to life imprisonment with a minimum of 18 years and 4 months brought a measure of justice, though it could never fill the void left by Marta's absence. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic abuse and the strength of those who fight for their independence, ensuring her memory endures as a call for awareness and change. Many people do not recognize that the person in front of them is actually dangerous rather than loving. Unfortunately, not everyone has the opportunity to correct their mistakes. History tends to repeat itself, including its darkest moments. In today's story, we will discuss a significant betrayal that led to one of the most brutal and senseless crimes in Alaska's history, driven by greed and foolishness. This tragic event took place in Anchorage, Alaska. Interestingly, although the overall crime rate in the U.S. has been declining, Anchorage is an exception, with violent crime rates being 60% higher than the national average. Statistics show that even women in this area commit violent crimes more frequently, usually targeting their loved ones. Cynthia Hoffman spent her entire life in Anchorage. Family and friends described her as a bright and kind girl working hard to achieve her American dream. She faced challenges due to a developmental delay, which made her school experience difficult. Nevertheless, Cynthia never gave up, consistently aimed for greater achievements. She graduated from high school, completed driving school, and secured a job at a diner. She cherished her friendships, particularly with her best friend Denali Bremer. The two had been friends since elementary school and had plans to go to college together. Although she aspired to attend college, those dreams were ultimately unfulfilled. Cynthia's parents were divorced, but she had good relationships with both her father, Timothy Hoffman, and her mother, who both supported her endeavors. On June 2, 2019, 19-year-old Cynthia missed a scheduled meeting with her father. Timothy, a construction worker, often brought Cynthia along on part-time jobs, where she helped him with minor tasks. In return, he paid her, teaching her the importance of hard work and saving money from a young age. Cynthia had assisted her father frequently for over a year, and they saw each other daily. On that particular day, she was expected to meet him after school. Her father had promised to pay her for past work when he was short on cash, so she was excited to go because it meant she would get paid double. She also mentioned that she needed money for a party that weekend. Cynthia texted her father to let him know she was at the park for a meeting and promised to return in about an hour. Timothy waited for her, but she never came back. He tried calling her phone and sending her messages, but she didn't respond. He thought it was possible she was just out with friends and lost track of time, so he hesitated to call the police. However, none of his messages were read, and his calls went unanswered throughout the day. Concerned about his daughter and her unexplained absence, he decided to contact the authorities. When Timothy arrived at the police station, he reported Cynthia as missing. The police took the case seriously and quickly began their investigation. They organized search teams, brought in volunteers. Timothy joined the search right away, driving around the city and asking people if they had seen his daughter. He showed them her photo, but despite his efforts all day, he couldn't find any useful information. From the beginning, he had a nagging feeling that something was wrong. Cynthia's behavior was unusual. She had never been gone for this long before, and she didn't have any mental health issues or a tendency to run away. She was naive, needed guidance. There had been no family conflicts or signs that she wanted to leave. In the days that followed, Timothy began to lose hope for a positive outcome. He started to fear that someone had lured his daughter to the park with harmful intentions, despite the ongoing search. The police initially thought Timothy might have more information, but he had a verified alibi during this time. Timothy stayed in touch with Cynthia's friends, particularly her best friend Denali, who had been in regular contact with Cynthia and was one of the last to see her. Denali expressed that she had no knowledge of Cynthia's whereabouts and hoped for her safe return. She requested updates if Timothy discovered any new information. Meanwhile, some school friends reported that they last saw Cynthia and Denali leaving together in a car, heading off in an unknown direction. This raised suspicions, as lying seemed unnecessary unless someone had something to conceal. When investigators looked into Cynthia's social media, they found that a person named Tyler had invited her for a ride, which she had accepted. This invitation coincided with the timing of her disappearance. With no new leads, detectives began tracking Cynthia's contacts leading up to her missing status. Who is Tyler? What was Cynthia doing, and where was she headed? Her classmates confirmed that she had planned to meet her father to help him with work and collect her payment. After the police spoke with Denali, she changed her story about Timothy. She admitted that after classes, she and Cynthia were walking to their cars when she dropped Cynthia off at the nearest city park. Following that, Cynthia sent her father a message updating him on her whereabouts and promised to see him later. However, after those messages, Cynthia's phone went silent. The search efforts then shifted from the city streets to the dense underbrush of the park. On June 4, 2019, just 2 days after her missing, Cynthia Hoffman was discovered dead. The 19-year-old's body was found on the banks of the Eklutna River, a popular tourist spot. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her mouth was taped shut. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, inflicted from behind. Sadly, the concerns of her loving father were realized. Around the same time, Denali's mother went to the police station to report that Denali and her friend might know where Cynthia had gone and could be connected to the case. According to Denali's mother, both Denali and her 16-year-old friend Caden McIntosh, claimed to know what happened to Cynthia. They were both interrogated, with the police particularly focused on why Denali was using a different name. When they met Caden, he caught the officer's attention. The boy was visibly shaking and gave confused, evasive answers, leading them to believe he should be questioned first. Caden was extremely nervous and soon admitted to murdering Cynthia Hoffman. He claimed that his 18-year-old girlfriend, Denali, had planned the murder but could not explain why. Denali was uncooperative from the start, avoiding communication with investigators, refuting Caden's account, and presenting an alternate narrative. She stated that she, Caden, and Cynthia went to Thunderbird Falls after school for a photo shoot. They intended to create a unique scene that involved using tape and ropes to stage a kidnapping, with Cynthia's mouth taped and her hands bound. Denali admitted that she carried a gun for self-defense, and all participants in the plan were aware of this. She recounted that at one point, Caden took the gun, aimed it at Cynthia, and attacked her in the back of the head without any clear reason. Denali said she was shocked and confused afterward, unsure of how to respond. The group simply disposed of the body in the water and left, as Caden commanded her to do so in a threatening manner, which intimidated her into compliance. She felt it wasn't worth informing the police to avoid causing a panic, worried that she might become another victim. Additionally, she couldn't provide any information about a motive for the murder. There were no known conflicts among them, and no one had witnessed such cruelty before. As a result of the statements, Caden McIntosh was charged with murdering Cynthia Hoffman. Criminologists examined the crime scene, and forensic experts conducted an autopsy. This led to the collection of enough evidence to reconstruct the events of June 2nd. However, the stories told by the young people at the police station contained many inconsistencies, particularly regarding the motive, which remained unclear. The mystery was clarified when law enforcement accessed Denali's mobile phone. They discovered that she was not just a witness to the murder, but also involved in it. The situation became clearer after examining her messages. After Cynthia's death, Denali posted on social media, "Oh, look what we just did," directed at someone named Tyler. This message was shockingly cynical and cruel, revealing not a grieving best friend but rather a brutal killer who took pride in her actions. The police obtained a Snapchat video that served as crucial evidence of Denali's guilt. This prompted them to question her again, as there was enough evidence to charge both Caden and Denali in connection with the murder. Caden claimed he had been manipulated and that Denali had suggested the attack. She continued to deny any wrongdoing until she was asked about Tyler, who was saved in her phone as a babe. The police found that shortly before the tragedy, Denali met a man from Kansas on an app where he claimed to be a millionaire. They started off communicating and flirting, but eventually, he sent her a disturbing message. Tyler gradually got Denali to open up about her preferences, including her intimate desires. He revealed that he was willing to pay $9 million for photos and videos depicting abuse violence. Denali became intrigued, and over time, her friend on social media convinced her to kill. Cynthia was an easy target because she was Denali's best friend, very naive, and completely trusted her. This made it easy for Denali to lure her into a trap. Investigators identified the car used by the young killers during the murder. It belonged to a relative of Denali. They interviewed Denali's 19-year cousin, Caleb Leland, who was aware of the $9 million offer and supported Denali, thinking the money would solve their financial issues. Denali had asked to borrow his car to take the victim and her accomplice to the murder scene. In return, she promised him $500,000. After agreeing to help facilitate the murder of an innocent person, Caleb was fully aware of her intentions. He confirmed that Cynthia's murder was not a result of a desire for a photo shoot or an accident. It was a planned act of revenge for money. Denali had discussed her plans with her brothers, detailing where she intended to take her best friend and outlining the murder plan in great detail. Although Caleb didn't fully believe Denali was serious at first, he grasped the seriousness of the situation only after hearing about Cynthia's death. However, his disbelief was just a cover. He was trying to downplay his role in the tragedy to lessen his potential punishment. Between May and June 2019, police focused their investigation on 3 suspects: Denali Bremer, Caden McIntosh, and Caleb Leland. They were believed to have plotted a murder together. As detectives gathered more evidence, it became increasingly clear that these teenagers were guilty. Notably, all three were friends of the victim, yet they betrayed her without remorse. Tragically, they valued $9 million more than the life of their friend. Investigators also found that two other teenagers were aware of the crime. However, they were minors at the time of the attack and were not considered accomplices. They had simply overheard Denali confessing to the crime. Their failure to report this information was disappointing, as they could have helped prevent the tragedy by alerting the police. To protect the minors and their families, their names were kept confidential and did not come up in court. The planning for the massacre began 4 months before the murder. On June 2, 2019, the juvenile offenders launched their attack. Denali invited Cynthia to join her and Caden on a hike to a remote area near Thunderbird Falls deep in the park. The accomplices had meticulously prepared their plan, even practicing with an unloaded gun. Denali pretended to be a future victim and used her brother's car, which he had lent her for $500,000. Once they reached the riverbank, Caden and Cynthia temporarily left Denali behind and advanced ahead. Suddenly, Caden drew a gun and pointed it at Cynthia's head. Denali caught up, restrained Cynthia by tying her hands and taping her mouth shut. Cynthia quickly realized this was not a prank, but it was too late for her to escape or shout for help. Terrified, she was forced to kneel. Denali's brother filmed the entire incident. Caden then shot Cynthia in the back of the head with a 9mm pistol, killing her instantly. Denali and Caden disposed of her body in the river and tried to erase any evidence linking them to the crime. They burned some of Cynthia's belongings, including her purse and mobile phone. Afterward, Denali sent a message to Cynthia's father, Timothy, from Cynthia's phone, fabricating a story about a scheduled meeting with a new boyfriend. Detectives later found evidence that Denali attempted to delete data from her mobile phone. However, despite her efforts, many conversations with Tyler remained, in which she detailed the murder plan and shared photos and videos related to the crime. Even after the murder was committed, she unsuccessfully tried to erase the incriminating evidence. In reality, she stayed in contact with Tyler throughout the murder, providing him with detailed updates. Although Tyler lived hundreds of kilometers away, he was just as responsible for the crime as the individuals who carried it out. Law enforcement focused on identifying him to ensure he faced justice. It is important to note that Tyler sought not only murder but also abuse violence. However, forensic experts found no evidence of such acts on the victim's body. This raised alarming implications, suggesting that if incentives had been provided, Denali and her accomplices might have continued to commit similar crimes. Fortunately, they were identified and arrested immediately after the first murder, and they did not receive any compensation from Tyler. Specialists were called in to investigate and traced the phone number of the perpetrator. It was revealed that Tyler was not in Kansas, but in Indiana. The actual mastermind behind the brutal crime was Darren Schillmiller, who grew up in New Salisbury. He had been exchanging photos with Denali for a while, but he had not sent her any pictures of himself. At first, Tyler had pretended to be a wealthy millionaire who won the lottery, but in reality, the instigator of the crime was a 21-year-old who was far from being a millionaire. Friends and family described him as a reclusive and strange person who had faced bullying during school. Darren had endured a difficult upbringing with an alcoholic father and had minimal social interaction in school. His unusual clothing style often led to conflicts, and after graduation, he was frequently seen engaging in suspicious activities, like chasing cats that later vanished without a trace. However, there had been no previous reports of cruelty from him. After completing his studies, he found it difficult to determine his path in life and was unable to secure a full-time job. This situation took Denali by surprise, as she genuinely thought she would receive $9 million for her crime. Once Denali discovered Tyler's real identity, she chose to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed that she had been in an online relationship with Tyler for several months, during which he used pictures of an unrelated person from the internet to deceive her. This manipulation led her to be misled by the future killer. Denali expressed her desire to resolve her problems, and those of her family, through money, having dealt with her friend. However, this was not the only troubling request from the millionaire's friend. According to her, he urged her to commit abuse violence against 2 children, intending to use a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old boy for this purpose. They were meant to suffer and die in pain, enduring torture, abuse. Fortunately, this horrific plan never came to fruition. When the police arrived at Darren's door, he was taken aback and promptly confessed to everything. He admitted to having been in contact with Denali for several months, realized that she was easily influenced and manipulated. Consequently, this quiet, deceitful man convinced himself that he could take someone's life through another person. Denali acknowledged that she remained influenced by Tyler, even after he refused to finance the initial massacre. They continued to have faith in him, waited for payment, and naively hoped for a better life ahead. Meanwhile, Tyler manipulated them, holding on to their trust while blackmailing them with incriminating evidence of the murder. He then demanded more killings and continued his threats. Fortunately, law enforcement apprehended the entire gang before further harm could be done. The prosecutor's office charged all those involved in the massacre with conspiracy and premeditated murder. The 2 youngest participants, whose identities were never revealed, were also accused of being complicit because they hid the murderers' identities. They never even informed her parents, despite having the chance to potentially save her. The crime that occurred in Alaska gained significant media attention, sparking public outrage. Journalists were eager for a sensational story, which created challenges for the victim's family. The relatives of the young offenders also faced severe repercussions, including numerous threats and genuine fears for their safety. Cynthia's family mourned her loss, lamenting that her trusting nature and vulnerability, stemming from her developmental delays, ultimately led to her suffering. With the same level of intelligence as a 12-year-old, she believes she is surrounded by trustworthy individuals. Many people who knew Darren spoke to the media and the police about him. Several of his classmates described him as a strange teenager who was withdrawn and struggled to fit in. It was not surprising that he grew into a cruel internet troll with violent intentions. Detectives discovered a significant amount of incriminating material on his computer, including numerous files of child abuse, which led to additional charges against him. He also showed a disturbing desire for cruelty and torture. Evidence revealed that Denali was not the first victim of this liar. He used various social networks and messaging apps to create fake accounts, deceiving teenagers and even children. Initially, his actions were limited to obtaining obscene images, but feeling untouchable, he escalated his behavior. Over several years, he lured dozens of girls and women into his traps. Some of the victims, from whom he extorted obscene photos, testified in court. Once he received the first image, he began to blackmail them for more. Fortunately, many prior victims managed to escape Darren's grasp, partly due to police threats. Unfortunately, this was not the case for Denali, whom Darren acknowledged was the most naive of his victims. Denali and his accomplices were involved in one of the most serious crimes in Alaskan history, the brutal murder of Cynthia Hoffman. This tragic event highlighted themes of betrayal, greed, and folly. Cynthia fell victim to an online manipulator, failing to verify his identity, and ultimately led 4 others into the murder. The case remained confidential, but the lives of everyone involved were forever altered. In February 2023, Denali Bremer, 23, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder after charges of conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and second-degree murder were dismissed. Nearly a year later, her sentencing will take place over 3 days in January and February 2024. The 99-year sentence is the maximum the court is allowed to impose, according to a press release from the Alaska Department of Justice. Caleb Leland, who provided the car for the crime, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in November 2023 and was sentenced to 30 years in prison in August 2024. On May 17, 2024, Caden McIntosh, 21, pleaded guilty to the murder of Cynthia. Anchorage Superior Court Judge Andrew Peterson accepted Caden's guilty plea to 1 count of second-degree murder. All other counts were dismissed as part of the agreement. The court will decide Caden's sentence at a sentencing hearing. The agreement between the parties allows the court to sentence Caden to a prison term of 30 to 85 years. Sentencing is scheduled to begin on November 14, 2024, before Judge Peterson and is expected to last 2 days. Caden is currently in the custody of the Alaska Department of Corrections and is no longer eligible for release under the terms of his release. Darren Showmiller, who solicited the murder, was 25 when his trial began. He chose not to defend himself, allowing his lawyer to read a statement to the jury. Darren admitted to making a grave mistake that led to the death of an innocent girl, expressing remorse and asking for forgiveness from her family. However, these words did not sway the jury, and he was sentenced to 99 years in prison for his actions that destroyed multiple lives. Every year on the anniversary of Cynthia's death, her father organizes a motorcycle ride to celebrate. Timothy Hoffman, 58, was among those attending the event on June 2, 2024, when friends and family gathered to remember Cynthia. However, he lost control of his motorcycle and died in the accident. On the evening of September 10, 2012, a small village in France was quiet, but something life-changing was about to unfold inside one home. Jacqueline Savage had lived in fear for nearly 50 years, trapped in a cycle of violence that seemed impossible to escape. That night, everything reached a breaking point. Her husband, Norbert Moreau, was sitting on the terrace, drinking whiskey as he had all day. Moments before, the house had been filled with his shouting, threats, and the sound of another strike. Jacqueline had experienced this too many times before, but this time was different. Instead of waiting for the chaos to end, she walked to the cabinet, retrieved a hunting rifle, and loaded it. She stepped onto the terrace, took a deep breath, and did something she never thought she would. A gunshot echoed. How everything led up to this moment and what would unfold next was just beginning. Jacqueline Savage was born on December 27, 1947, in Montargis, France. Little is known about her early life, except that her mother was a victim of domestic violence. She grew up in a large family with 5 brothers and 2 sisters. At just 16, Jacqueline met Norbert, a charming young man who was only a month older than her. His charm made him popular with women, but he chose Jacqueline. Their youthful romance quickly turned into a passionate love affair. Jacqueline's relationship changed dramatically when she became pregnant at 17. On June 5, 1965, she decided to marry Norbert, despite her mother's strong objections and her siblings' unanimous disapproval, who thought she was making a big mistake. Jacqueline was in love and, like many young women, dreamed of having a home and family. Their first daughter was born in 1966, followed by a second daughter while Norbert was away from home completing his military service. During this time, Jacqueline trained as a seamstress. 4 years later, they built their dream home in a beautiful village 80 kilometers south of Paris. The house, made of wood and stone, had a large garden and terrace, making it an ideal place to start a new chapter in their lives. It was here that they welcomed their 3rd and 4th children. As the years went by, Norbert's work life declined significantly. In 1981, he was let go due to professional misconduct. Struggling financially, he and Jacqueline started their own independent transport business. Jacqueline took care of the administration and deliveries. By 1989, their 2 children joined the family business, which had grown to include wine sales. Over the years, Jacqueline managed to secure her retirement benefits but continued to work. As their children became adults, they went their separate ways, except for only son, who remained single. By the time Jacqueline turned 65, she had 11 grandchildren. She still lived with Norbert in their home and was actively involved in a local hunting association. Though they seemed like a loving, close family on the outside, there was a troubling and tragic reality beneath the surface, one that would soon take the world by surprise. On the evening of September 10, 2012, around 7:30 p.m., Jacqueline took a hunting rifle from the cabinet. She went to the basement to fetch the cartridges and then went out onto the terrace where Norbert was sitting with a glass of whiskey. Without any hesitation, she attacked him 3 times in the back. Afterward, Jacqueline called emergency services calmly. By the time they arrived, Norbert was dead. The incident occurred the day after Jacqueline's son took his own life. Jacqueline claimed that Mr. Moreau had physically and abused his wife, daughter, and son. She stated that she acted out of fear for her own life and her children's safety. That morning, Norbert had made new threats, vowing to carry them out. Jacqueline claimed that the attacking was the end of 47 years of constant domestic abuse, which had not only ruined her life but had also left lasting wounds on their children. During her initial court appearance, Jacqueline described how she first recognized Norbert's true character, characterized by violent outbursts. The first time he hit her was after a dinner party at a friend's house, where she had received compliments about her appearance. Out of nowhere, he struck her hard across the face, leaving her shocked and speechless. As time went on, the physical violence, abuse, and verbal attacks became part of her everyday life. Their children were all affected, with her son bearing the brunt of his father's psychological cruelty. Norbert would belittle, humiliate, and break him down mentally. The daughters suffered even more. 2 of them were subjected to their father's abuse. Whenever Norbert lost his temper, he would lash out indiscriminately. The girls learned to stay silent, endure the pain, and hope it would end quickly. The violence started with slaps and gradually intensified to cruel insults, severe beatings, and acts of humiliation. At one point, he struck Jacqueline with a motorcycle helmet, leaving her with a permanent scar on her forehead. For nearly 50 years, Jacqueline lived in suffering. In her testimony, Jacqueline initially excused Norbert's behavior, attributing it to his tough childhood. She hoped they would eventually become a normal, loving family. But as time went on, the violence became commonplace, and fear of retaliation kept her silent. Their daughter, Fabienne, tried to break this silence. As a teenager, she ran away and reported to the police that her father had abused her. However, instead of taking action, the police officer merely warned Norbert. Fearing the repercussions, Fabienne felt compelled to withdraw her statement, leaving her father unpunished. This enraged him even more. Jacqueline, meanwhile, was terrified of what would happen to her and her children if she left, especially since she had no financial independence. All their bank accounts were in Norbert's name. She felt trapped and reflected, what would she have done with 4 children? She stayed to protect them. Jacqueline felt trapped in her situation. Norbert controlled not only their home but also isolated her from her family. Her parents and siblings had distanced themselves, refusing to intervene, and she had lost all her friends. The only people she interacted with were those in Norbert's tightly knit circle. There was a dark time when she considered ending her life. Most days, she just endured the abuse, waiting for it to stop. However, the night she killed Norbert was different. She noticed something unsettling in his eyes and a menacing tone in his voice that deeply scared her. In that moment, she could vividly imagine her children lying lifeless in front of her, same her son had been. On that day, he stormed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and threatened her, saying, "This time, he'll finish she off." Then he forcefully grabbed her, dragging her through the kitchen, into the hallway. He physically assaulted her and yelled that he would kill her children, whom he called the brats, and that he would also kill her. In that moment, something inside her broke. Earlier that day, they had argued about business. Norbert had started drinking around 11 a.m. and became increasingly irritable as the day went on. At one point, Jacqueline had locked herself in the bedroom to rest, taking some sedatives. By 7:30 p.m., he burst into the room, slapped her hard across the face, and insulted her, calling her lazy and demanding that she prepare dinner. After that, he poured himself another drink. He sat outside on the terrace, vowing to eliminate them all. Jacqueline remembered standing there, tasting the blood from her lip after his latest attack. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The preliminary investigation revealed an injury on her lip, but no other significant signs of violence on her body. No sedatives were found in her system. Her trial occurred nearly 2 years later, on October 23, 2014, and gained national attention, sparking discussions about domestic violence and self-defense laws in France. In court, Jacqueline pleaded not guilty, and her defense claimed she acted to protect herself. She detailed years of brutal beatings, humiliation, and abuse from her husband. The judge persistently questioned her about why she never reported the abuse to the authorities. Jacqueline explained that she remained silent to survive. She understood that revealing the truth would lead to unbearable consequences. She shared her feelings of fear, shame, and the constant control Norbert had over her life. She recalled how she had often waited for his angry outbursts to subside, for her injuries to heal, and for the day she could finally escape. Finally, her son's death became unbearable for her. Journalists at the trial noted that she seemed distant and withdrawn, often going silent when the court questioned her. Jacqueline stated that they feared Norbert, and despite some complaints from his victims, nothing ever changed. Her 3 daughters also testified in court. The youngest, who experienced both physical and emotional abuse since she was 16, described her father as a monster. They all confirmed that Norbert had a volatile relationship with their brother, often resulting in physical fights. Their testimonies were crucial in revealing the ongoing cycle of abuse in their family and the desperation that led their mother to take action. Neighbors who testified described Norbert as a violent and intimidating individual. One woman candidly expressed her relief at his death, stating that Jacqueline had done them all a favor. A longtime friend of the couple characterized Norbert as impulsive and aggressive, frequently erupting in anger. After a challenging 5-day trial, Jacqueline's lawyers, who specialize in domestic abuse cases, argued for a broad interpretation of self-defense. They sought her complete exoneration, highlighting that she had suffered psychological and physical abuse for long time. They argued that she was well aware of Norbert's capacity to follow through on his threats. In contrast, the prosecution maintained that this was not a genuine case of self-defense, pointing out that Norbert had been shot in the back and that several minutes had elapsed since his last attack. They sought a 14-year prison sentence. On October 28, 2014, Jacqueline was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The judges criticized her for not showing remorse, arguing that she portrayed herself as a victim instead of expressing regret. They referenced French law, which states that self-defense must be an immediate and proportional response to an unjust attack. The verdict led to widespread outrage throughout France, with thousands protesting in support of Jacqueline. Demonstrators condemned the court for not understanding the realities of domestic violence and coercive control. Following the trial, Jacqueline unintentionally became a symbol in the fight against gender-based violence. Her case sparked a national discussion about the prolonged suffering of victims in abusive relationships. A support committee was quickly established, gaining backing from the mayor of Paris, environmental activists, and left-wing politicians. Some women held a dramatic protest outside the prison where Jacqueline was incarcerated, they wearing flower crowns while they began symbolically digging a tunnel, as if trying to free her. Jacqueline's lawyers worked hard to secure her early release. The strong public support greatly encouraged her. Despite suffering from bronchitis and chronic back pain, she was touched to see the first protest in her honor. In August 2015, a local court in Melun denied her request for parole, claiming she had not expressed enough remorse. However, due to continued public pressure, a second hearing was held on December 3, 2015. Her daughters campaigned vigorously for her freedom, emphasizing that she had endured a lifetime of mistreatment and did not deserve to spend her final years in prison. Nonetheless, the Paris Court of Appeals upheld the original sentence. Their only remaining option was to seek a reduction of her sentence. Public outrage over Jacqueline's conviction was so strong that it caught the president's attention. On December 22, 2016, Jacqueline's daughters arranged a meeting with the then-president to ask for his help in securing a pardon for their mother. Just 2 days later, he granted a partial pardon using a rarely invoked constitutional power. He urged the courts to impose the minimum sentence possible, which resulted in a reduction of her prison term by 2 years and 4 months. A petition launched on Change to ask the French president to pardon Ms. Savage gathered 435,971 signatures. On February 26, 2017, a French television program called September à Huit received an extremely high viewership of 5 million people due to a segment describing Jacqueline Savage. In addition, politicians spoke out in support of Ms. Savage, forming a support committee, including Anne Hidalgo and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. After the presidential pardon was announced, a major debate broke out among lawyers and criminal law experts about whether the rule of law was respected. Their view was that the media had overturned 2 consecutive court decisions by influencing the public, who then pushed for the presidential pardon. Jacqueline's newfound freedom lasted exactly 4 years. She passed away in her home on July 23, 2020, at the age of 72, after being diagnosed with a terminal illness. To this day, she remains a significant figure in France's history, remembered as both a victim of extreme domestic abuse and a catalyst for change in the country's legal system.